Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Could we please be upstanding for the Mayor of the Royal Borough of Windsor Maidenhead?
Before I open the meeting, I'd like to invite Zia Mahudin to start with a prayer.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان صدق الله العظيم.
And now I'd just like to recite some verses from the Quran in English. O you who believe, be persistently standing firm in justice as witnesses for Allah, even if it be against yourselves or parents and relatives. Whether one is rich or poor, Allah is more worthy of both. Follow not your desires, lest you not be just. If you distort your testimony or refuse to give it, then Allah is aware of what you do. Ameen. Thank you.
Thank you. Please be seated. Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to this hybrid council meeting. My name is Simon Bond. I'm the Mayor of the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead, and I will be chairing the meeting. It's being both recorded and streamed live on YouTube. I would like to remind all attendees, whether here in the room or in the Zoom meeting, that participation indicates consent to the audio and video being streamed live, an acknowledgement that after the meeting, it will continue to be available in the public domain. Please respect that during the meeting, I may need to take time to discuss procedures with officers. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome new member, Councillor Councillor. We will now move to item 1 on the agenda. Are there any apologies for absence?
Apologies received from Councillor Del Campo, and Councillor Taylor is attending virtually tonight.
And also sends her apologies this evening.
We now come to agenda item 2, minutes of the previous council meeting held on Wednesday, the 25th of September, 2024. Please note that the written responses to the supplementary questions that were asked to councillors who were not present have since been published and can be accessed via the Councillor's website. Can these be agreed? Thank you. The full advice for making declarations of interest is set out in the agenda at item 3. If any councillor has an interest to declare, please indicate by raising your hand and I will come to you in turn. Joshua Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For agenda item 10A, motion on notice by Councillor Davies. As the motion asks to write to me in my capacity as an MP, obviously it wouldn't be appropriate for me to take part in that debate. So I will be leaving room for that item.
Thank you. Oran, has anyone remotely indicated they have an interest?
No, Mr. Mayor, no more hands.
Moving on to agenda item 4, which are Mayor's communications. These have been circulated as part of the agenda, and the list is just coming up on the screen. Oh. The list in the agenda, I think, is probably incomplete because I actually attended a meeting this morning. So just in case you think I've been putting my feet up. This morning I was in Ascot helping the chair of the parish council to open a charity card shop in one of the local churches in All Souls. And they're very keen for everyone to know that it's there, it's moved to a new location. I'd like to focus on young people. Thank you. I presented a donation for the Alexander Devine Children's Hospice to the founder, Fiona Devine, which I was very pleased to do. There is another opportunity to support a local charity for young people, which is the Baby Bank on the 6th of December. And it'd be lovely to see people who are available there. On young people's creativity, we attended the Windsor Young Writers Competition. There were both prose and poetry entries, and we were very impressed by the quality. Deputy Mayor Mandy Braw similarly was impressed at the school's wildlife art competition in Sunningdale. I also attended Numbers Day, which is a NSPCC, National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, to get children enthused about numbers. And on behalf of the borough, I welcome the Duchess of Edinburgh to Legoland. As well as seeing this very positive side of things, I do also see the other side, the considerable challenges faced by some young people, principally from visits to the number 22 youth counselling service, which I think must be so valued by our local schools. At the other end of the age scale, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Braw and I each presented a 100th birthday card to a resident. And we attended the 175th birthday of Windsor and Eton Central Station. I've kept it brief because I know we have a lot on the agenda, but hopefully that gives you a flavour of what we've been doing this last few months. Next on to item 5, which are public questions. We have 5 questions submitted for this evening. Members of the public who submitted questions in advance were notified yesterday that written answers to each question had been published to the council website, and they would be displayed on the screen where feasible. They have therefore been given the opportunity to consider the response and to prepare a supplementary question to ask if so desired. The first questioner is John Baldwin. Is he present? John Baldwin, do you have a supplementary question?
I do. Thank you, Chair. The lead member's answer is closer to a metallurgy report than a serious attempt to engage with the question. Effectively, you are saying, everything is okay, take my word for it. Sadly, I cannot. Your administration is currently negotiating a huge loan from the Secretary of State for HCLG, who just happens to be the same minister who can waive any statutory protections enjoyed by our allotments. This fact makes your answer look ridiculously overconfident. Only by making these sites financially unviable for a developer can their long-term future be assured. That means massively increasing the tenure of plot holders. Such a measure would make permanent your current waiting lists, creating the need to set aside more land as you have a further statutory duty to do exactly that. Are any of these measures being seriously considered?
Thanks very much for the supplementary, John. Yes, I think I was sort of trying to answer the question behind the question, if you give me that liberty. I'm sure you know that the law you mentioned, the 1925 Act, applies to all land the council has purchased or appropriated for use as allotments, and where the land has not been designated for another purpose prior to its use as allotments. But my point was really that even allotments that might not have that specific protection are safe. Because the council, as you say, have a legal duty to provide allotments if there's sufficient demand, and demand is high and is likely to remain high. This administration, as I said, is 100% committed to allotments, and even under Section 114, I believe the risk to them would be very small. Your supplementary question about are we in any negotiations, I can tell you that we are having active discussions with Windsor Allotment Society, sorry, that's not their full title, about the possibility of a long-term lease. Those discussions are ongoing. Thank you.
Thank you. John Baldwin, for your second question, do you have a supplementary and do you have 1 minute?
I do, thank you. These legal opinions that you continue to refuse to publish contain nothing controversial. They do not relate to confidential commercial information, nor would they contain exempt personal information. They are only opinions on public law and public policy that bears directly upon your administration's decisions to frustrate the will of over 2,000 residents and to ignore the unanimous decision of 3 councillors elected by 5,000 more residents. Worse, your decision flies in the face of those of previous administrations. They shared outside legal opinions, one for the council and one for the LPA, regarding the Vicus Way car park debacle. Your reluctance seems to suggest that something has changed and that the administration you serve is less prepared to be open and transparent than that of much reviled former council leader Simon Dudley. Less transparent than Simon Dudley. Can that really be how you want to be remembered?
Councillor Beaumont, would you like to reply? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, John, for your original question and supplementary. Ultimately, I disagree that we are being less transparent than the previous administration. I'm sure you're not surprised to hear me say that. I mean, we've done a huge amount since taking power in the interest of transparency, including, for example, trying to move as much into Part 1 from Part 2 as possible. And we really see the fruit of that in both Cabinet and full council, where a huge amount of stuff, which for no good reason was put into Part 2 previously, is now in Part 1. But when it comes to legal advice, we do have to go through this process of the public interest test, and there are public interest arguments for and against, as I put in my original answer. And when it comes to public interest against release, I think possibly on one of the pieces of legal advice you mentioned, it really becomes quite apparent, because when it was the one that relates to the licensing decision, that is a licensing renewal which needs to take place on an annual basis. If we were to release council opinion or internal legal opinion about that decision, it would completely prejudice the ability to make the decision when it comes to renewal in 12 months' time. We would be giving the applicants the full knowledge of exactly what has been advised, and they can work out a new loophole to get around that. So I think it really is important that we consider each case on a case-by-case basis, and where there is no good reason to release, then unfortunately we do need to protect the council and therefore and protect the public interest at the same time.
Thank you. Question 3, Simon Williamson. If you have a supplementary, you have 1 minute to ask it.
Ooh. Can you hear me? Is that okay, Chair? Good. Councillor Coe, it's great news to hear all the blockages in the Raisbury ditch have been resolved, apart from the one landowner, and the flow will be restored once done. Please confirm, if Ardmore, one of the UK's biggest building contractors, the final riparian landowner that has not complied with the RBWM request to unblock it, B, what legal complexities are you referring to, given, as you know, the drain is legally protected to ensure it's free flowing? And finally, please confirm that after 8 months of planning, the council have now costed the project and found the appropriate contractor to commence work as soon as the issue is resolved with this one landowner. Thank you.
So yeah, thanks for your questions, Simon. Thank you for coming again, because I know you came and I was on holiday, unfortunately. So there's a couple of things there. One, there are 2 blockages. This is the lower one further down the watercourse, which we've started with first. In terms of a contractor to resolve the situation, that's for the riparian owner to do. So we are in discussions with the riparian owner about how they do that. They've come back to the council with a proposal which involves a diversion of the course of the Raisbury drain to go around their site. That appeals to me because that will be an open channel, so we'll be able to see what's going on with it in the future. But I know that Ewan will object to that because he wants it to be on the original course. And the legal blockage is actually Ewan's point of whether we are allowed to redirect the channel or not. The second blockage is in Feathers Lane, where half a dozen or so houses have been built on top of the channel with planning permission. Those houses would have needed a separate permission with regard to the channel itself, but would probably not have known that because it's obviously an obscure aspect of planning law. So again, when we get to that point, we'll be having to consider whether we have to lift up those homes and put a culvert underneath, or whether we will be doing a diversion. So the issue about diversions is a matter of convenience, I suppose, and speed at the Ardmore site, but it actually would be probably a necessity at the other site, because we may hit some complex issues with, human rights law in your home at the other site. So Ardmore have a plan that is ready to go if the diversion is allowed. If it isn't allowed, we'll be back to renegotiating what we do. I hope that's clear.
We're at the beginning of the flood season now, and residents feel very vulnerable given the extensive flooding last January and the fact that we absolutely have no flood defences at all for Raisbury. Given the drain remains blocked for 8 months after the council fully committed to clearing it, what is being done to expedite the clearance project to ensure resolution before the summer of 2025? Secondly, is it being done concurrently so no one challenge becomes a bottleneck? And if not, why not? And finally, why won't the council, which is publicly declared being open, honest and transparent when working for residents, share its original, assuming there was one, and latest project timing plan, assuming there is one, stating all actions and target dates required for the complete restoration of flow of the drain? Thank you.
So I think I've covered some of that in the previous answer. Essentially, the council doesn't have plans because it's not our job to do this. It's the riparian owner's job to do it. So our plans are for enforcement. That may be more complicated on the Feathers Lane section where there's a multiple of smaller landowners rather than one big landowner. The 2025 date is, I think, covers the Ardmore site. The reason why we haven't gone at the same time on both sites is simply limited officer capacity. We have one officer who covers this and virtually all the drainage in the council's remit, and they would only have time to attack one of the riparian owners that's carry out the enforcement with regard to one of the riparian owners at a time. So once the Ardmore one is resolved, and possibly this autumn, in the next month's quarter, they may get on to the second set, but the second set of blockages is more complicated because it's 5 or 6 landowners, it's people's homes, etc.
Thank you. Ian Haggart, do you have a supplementary? Oh, there you are. You have a minute to ask it.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for the response. Councillor Douglas, may I ask some questions so we can say a large part of Alexandra Gardens has been inaccessible to residents for the best part of 6 months with this Windsor wheel. So the question I have for you is, how much does it cost to reinstate these grounds and who is meeting those costs? Right, followed by, so will you received £40,000, well, that's the payment for that ultimately. So where will that be spent in Windsor for the benefit of Windsor residents, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Really grateful for the question. I mean, I'd like to say that our belief is that residents love the wheel and Windsor on Ice, the big amenity activities, attractions we've got there in Alexandra Gardens. Attractions like these are really popular with families, and as an administration, obviously, we're very pro-family, and not to mention pro people having fun. There's, I mean, thousands of people benefit, particularly young people, and as you mentioned, you know, RBWM benefits financially as well, so it really is a win-win. I take your point about the cost. I mean, I think when net positive, we can definitely share that. In terms of breakdowns and more specific details, I'll speak to officers to ask whether we can share anything further. Obviously, there are some commercial sensitivities around that, but we certainly see it as a positive, not only in terms of amenity, but in terms of the financial side. If you would like the footfall data in graph form, I'd also be happy to send that to you. If you just let me know and I'll email that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you to all the residents for your questions and for joining the meeting this evening. We now come to agenda item 6, which is to receive any petitions presented by councillors on behalf of residents. I have not been notified of any petitions. We now come to the substantive item this evening, which is agenda item 7, the report regarding the CIPFA Resilience Review final report and the RBWM Financial Stability and Improvement Plan. The minutes of last week's corporate overview and scrutiny panel, where the draft was discussed, were published as a supplement prior to tonight's meeting. Therefore, I would encourage councillors to only raise new points in debate, in addition to what is set out within the published supplement. Councillor Jones, would you like to introduce this item, please?
Thank you very much. In spring of this year, the Council commissioned the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, CIPFA, to give their expert view of the Council's financial resilience, taking a detailed look at our commercial properties and investments, debt, capital programme in companies, children's and adult services and governance. I expect you have all read the review, which outlines the circumstances leading to the severe financial challenges we as a council need to respond to. At last month's Cabinet meeting, I talked through the review in detail, so I won't go into all that again here, as both the minutes and recording are available online if you didn't catch the meeting at the time. However, there are some key areas I'm keen to highlight tonight. CIPFA is clear from the start of their report, due to the financial situation we inherited, a Section 114 will need to be issued, meaning the Council is unable to meet its liabilities unless tough decisions are taken and support is forthcoming from central government. They also note that their previous review back in 2020 also highlighted the risk of a Section 114 notice. In fact, I remember the previous leader stating that would be approaching central government regarding an uplift to council tax above the cap. We uncovered a backlog of gaps in financial monitoring under the previous Conservative administrations, most notably in balance sheet reconciliations dating back to March 2021, and where there'd been use of capital funding for revenue items, revenue costs were understated, therefore inflating reserves, meaning that 25 million of historical cost corrections have now been added into the 23-24 accounts. This figure is an increase on the 16 million that we previously reported. We are close to finalising the 23-24 accounts, but there could still be some small movement in the final outturn. CIPFA also reports that overspends on demand-led services were historically being masked by other underspends, like temporary government funding during COVID and historical accounting errors and decisions. And while previous unaudited 23-24 accounts included savings of 10.5 million, there wasn't actually a plan for how those savings would be made, so not worth the paper they were written on. While CIPFA recognised the significant action taken by this administration over the last 18 months to get the situation under control, the debt we inherited from the previous Conservative administration of over 200 million costs us 14 million a year to service. The council tax gap they have created costs us 30 million pounds a year. And now historical accounting inaccuracies will cost us another one-off 25 million, leaving the council unable to weather the storm of the increased demand on services being felt by councils across the country, especially for social care and housing. Other councils are digging into their reserves. We don't have any, because the previous administration chose to borrow money they couldn't afford and cut council tax year after year. A series of completely irresponsible decisions and an absolute betrayal of our residents. To compound matters, development contracts entered in between 2015 and 2023 will not give us substantial returns until at least 2030, due to the terms that were agreed at the time. And what we are able to get back will also be affected by increased developer costs over time. So we cannot rely on that to fill the black hole we inherited. What is crystal clear is we need to put historical problems right and correct budget irregularities from previous years, alongside building on action we've already taken to transform services and continuing to explore every opportunity to make savings and generate income. Ultimately, we need essential support from government to get onto a sustainable footing, and our conversations with them continue on both funding and the potential to raise council tax above the current cap. You only have to look at the damage previous council tax cuts have made to the finances and our ability to deliver the services that our residents deserve to know that we need to put this right. We are in discussions with government and have been since May on exceptional support. But let me be clear, the responsibility remains ours. It can't be delegated, it cannot be deferred. We have a legal duty to set a budget for next year, the council. The support deal we will get will be dependent on government being reassured that we're controlling spend, keeping it as low as possible, that we have a plan for recovery, and that we are prepared to take tough decisions locally. This is why it is so important that we set out and demonstrate progress on the commitments we are making and the actions we will take. Our response to CIPFA and their recommendations, our financial improvement and sustainability plan, which I also hope you have read, outlines the actions and decisions we will need to take over the short and medium term to get the council and its finances on track. An action tracker is now set out in the appendix with priority actions across all areas of the council. You can see that we're already moving at pace with many actions on track and some already complete. We also know we need to be outward looking and learn from best practice, which is why we're proposing to voluntarily establish an independent financial and sustainability board to support the council's recovery. This is something that other councils have done in order to secure government support. The Board of Experts will support our improvement by providing independent critical challenge on our transformation and financial recovery plans, helping us identify any gaps or further action. They will review our delivery of the FISP and the action tracker, scrutinising our progress, and also play a role in reporting progress to government as part of our exceptional funding ask. This really is key to ensuring we're focused on the right areas, enabling us to draw on the expertise and experience of those that have been involved in similar situations, rather than being dictated to, unable to reflect localised views and considerations, helping us to retain some control. CIPFA notes that in many areas, council teams are understaffed and underskilled to provide the level of support required for a council this size. And also the complexity of challenges it faces, there are a number of single points of failure. We know this must be addressed and are looking to build capacity in key areas, alongside helping to foster a positive culture, clear vision and purpose, and ensuring staff and councillors feel supported and empowered to both embrace change and deliver improvement. And it is essential we work together. All councillors and officers have a part to play in our recovery. Working as part of one council, breaking down silos across services, reducing duplication and streamlining processes. We do need to be realistic about the challenge we are facing and to manage expectations. The scale of the challenge means that without adequate funding, the council will not be able to do everything it has done before. As the council's situation evolves, we will keep the plan updated, alongside being transparent about action needed, our plans and progress. We are working through the approach to report back to councillors and communicate to residents. While we can discuss the whys and wherefores of certain historical accounting decisions and transactions, really, they are all just consequences of historic decisions to consistently cut council tax over many years. We need to use this time to discuss our plans for the future, the action we will take, and how we will work together to make the council more sustainable. The recommendations can be found at the top of page 2 of the report, and I commend this paper to council. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Do you wish to speak or to reserve? I now open this to debate. Each councillor has one opportunity to speak and has 5 minutes to make their point. I can already see I've got councillors on the list. So I will ask Councillor Walters to speak first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On this side of the House, I think we're all a bit weary of hearing all the past, what's happened in the past. And when you look at it, I'm still very proud to be a Conservative. And I tell you why I say that. For years and years and years, this Royal Borough was the second lowest council tax in the country, bar one. And that was Westminster City Council, which I am very familiar with. 6 years running, we reduced the council tax. In other words, the people had more money in their pockets to spend. In 2016, 17, 18, we actually froze the council tax. And in the latter years of our administration, there was a very low number of council tax. When we left office, and this is giving you the other side of the picture, not this sort of wretched sort of how bad we were and all the rest of it. There was a debt of £230,000. Now, do what?
Million.
Million, rather. Sorry, it's my mistake. And when you calculate over the number of residents of the Royal Borough, which is roughly about 160,000, it works out on an average about the same debt per resident throughout the country at that time of local council. So it wasn't so bad as it's portrayed. The thing that costs a lot of money nowadays is the social services, the adult and children's services. That costs every penny we spend, 77% of our spending goes on adult and social services. That's what bankrupts councils, not the administration itself. It's just a bad place to be. And there's not a hell of a lot anybody could do about that. What the Liberal Democrats always tend to do, and all the left tend to do, is they simply want to tax. And in fact, your solution as to this problem, so-called problem, is to put up the council tax for residents. That really isn't the answer. What are you actually doing? As far as I can make out, the spending control panel was delayed for 6 months. The transformation plan has been delayed for about a year. Now we see this CIPFA report. There's some emergency plan all of a sudden, and the council is in grave financial position. There seems to be no improvement since the 4th of May in 2023, when the Liberal Democrats and others took over. In fact, it's got worse. Liberal Democrats, what are you doing instead? We get reams and reams of reports and recommendations, but what are you actually doing? I tell you what I would do. The first thing I would do is bring wholly in-house the owned RBWM property company, thus identifying the surplus. I know we did, but I didn't agree with it. Stop just moaning and start doing something real and practical. And the financial problems we all face. What else to say? Don't keep moaning at us, for God's sake. That's going to get nowhere. And there's something better to do than that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hunt, would you like to speak next, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hear just now that this state we need to be realistic. Realistic, 18 months later. Now, the Lib Dems and the partnership purported to know all the budget problems over the last few years, and it must be mentioned the lead member for finance was actually the chair of the Audit and Governance Committee. So that makes a big point. And I'll start by reminding members of the Lib Dem manifesto. We will restore the borough's finances. We will continue to be a low tax borough. We will continue to have the lowest Band D council tax outside London. That's yours. So what have they done after 18 months of running the council? Which obviously from this report, they don't have the ability to do. The answer is blame the Conservatives. You know, and let's blame the Conservatives for having low council tax to support our residents when this council was run effectively. And now we have more spends, especially on the Financial Improvement and Sustainability Board, which are bringing in, cost 80,000 plus. So more and more money is going to be spent, but not just for our residents, unfortunately. So you have, without doubt, lost control and without doubt incapable of running this council. We can see this in the accountancy's error. £16 million, which suddenly came to light. Oh, it was put in the wrong pot, we were told, only last week. Capital instead of revenue.
Officers.
Only yesterday.
Officers.
Excuse me. It's £25 million. It's gone up by 9 million. And now we hear this is general reserves. So you can't even make your mind up where the money is. Excuse me. So they're going to try and blame the Conservatives. But we must note, the CIPFA report stated in 23-24 and the identification of significant discrepancies in the balance sheet for the same year, that's 23-24. You only have to look at the incapability to run a council in the latest audit and governance figures. There's red across all the last 3 quarters. That's over the last 9 months. And it's red. It's red for finance, executive director resources, strengthening of financial controls, including scrutiny of non-statutory spend, a complete review of the balance sheet, regular timing reporting to ELT and Cabinet. Then we have the audits. The list of follow-ups not yet scheduled absolutely beggars belief. So many items rescheduled for 2025, and 8 of them were due in 2023. So let's go back to the last draft financial statement published, which was for 22-23. Under the Conservative administration and certified in June 23 by the head of finance and interim 151 officer, and it's waiting to be signed off. We had 1.460 million, about £1.5 million underspend against the revenue budget, which allowed the council to strengthen reserves to a more comprehensively cover for potential financial risks. The net revenue budget includes a further strengthening of reserves by 1 million. Indeed, we left 10 million in reserves in 2023.
Excuse me, could we just have quiet so we can all
do
hear?
not interrupt, because that's what is in this, and it was signed. It was actually signed. So there we go. The capital expenditure was 21.623 million, 72% below initial spending plans. We delivered a budget that was balanced and with a modest underspend in the last 4 years. We doubled unallocated reserves and now sit comparably with our Berkshire unitary peers, that's them. We increased levels of efficiency within the council with a clear plan to continue over the next 4 years.
Councillor Hunt, could you draw to a close, please?
Yep.
Thank you.
So 5 minutes gone. Did you give me an extra minute for the coughing? Oh, wait a minute.
You have gone over the 5 minutes, so.
Okay.
If that's it, can I move on to the next speaker?
Sorry?
If that's it, can I move on to the next speaker? You have gone over the 5 minutes. And can I ask that
all I can
councillors
say
be
is it's an absolute mess. You failed to do anything that you promised.
Councillor Singh, is it a point of order?
Can we stamp out people, other councillors haranguing and shouting over the speakers, please?
Yes,
We're all here to listen to that and doesn't bode very well for our public to see elected officials.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, I was. Thank you. I was going to.
Then they should leave
Thank
the
you,
chamber.
Councillor Singh. I was going to say if we could hear the councillors who are speaking, so we can all hear, and it makes it easier to take the minutes. I now call Councillor Genevieve Gosling.
Can you hear me? Oh, it's come on now. We're not alone in it as a council due to financial pressures across the country. Social services, as we said before, has been a large proportion of our expenditure, and us across the country in 22-23, £20 billion was spent on adult and children's social services. And I'm sure you all know these figures. But the LGA did an analysis, which I thought was interesting to read out tonight, that due to inflation and wage pressures alongside cost and demand pressures, English councils face a £2.3 billion funding gap in 25-26, rising to £3.9 billion in 22-27. This is £6.2 billion shortfall across the 2 years. So we as a council are looking for raising money. What concerns me is that in the past, there was on the table before I became a councillor, a discussion about the golf club. And I feel that had this gone through in the past, we would have had wouldn't have such a financial shortfall as we have at the moment. However, I know this is going through now, but isn't it a bit too late? Because we want the money now, and it looks like we won't receive it until 2025, which might be in the figure of 100 million. I believe that's correct. We've also discussed council tax tonight, and I would like to know what the actual figure is going to be that our residents have to pay. And suppose residents have to make these payments, what then? What commitment that they will deliver better services and value to our residents? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Larkham.
Mr. Mayor, I loved the report, most of which we knew anyway. When I got to page 54 or 55, it gave a couple of lists of Band D. So when we look here, Windsor and Maidenhead, Band D, £1,683. And what I did, I compared it with Slough, which is 2186. That's almost 30% difference between us and Slough. I don't know how we recover that. It actually gets worse because if you compare us with Reading, it's 40.6% that we would have to raise our Band D, which it currently is, to the Reading level. We have to have the income. We're going to have to raise the council tax. There's no argument about that. I'm not worried about accountability. I know who is responsible for the state that we're in. What you need to know is that the CIPFA report did not account for the £53 million partnership funding that was on the cards for the River Thames scheme, Channel 1, from at least 2015 onwards. It was removed in July 2020, thus saving this council £53 million at that time. On one decision, we, the poor victims downstream, were not told about it until after it was too late. We now have a new scheme, the Datchet to Hythe End Flood Improvement Measures Scheme. I suspect there is no provision for partnership funding. It might be less than £53 million, but I think we will be very lucky. The River Thames scheme itself is seeking a development consent order for what's left of it, channels 2 and 3, and 3 sets of weir works and widening of the Desborough Cut. What happens when it goes to the planning inspectorate? It's not like HS2 where they just chopped the limbs off the branches and left the main trunk. The River Thames scheme is incoherent because it does not connect to the Jubilee River. There's a big gap left in the middle. And the Datchet to Hyde End scheme is very unlikely, in my opinion, to go ahead. What happens then? The Environment Agency have already spent £90 million of your money on developing the River Thames scheme, what is left of it. And I cannot see any well-educated, right-minded, well-informed minister to rubber stamp the River Thames scheme in the current situation. So watch this space. There's another little bit, very quick. There's a couple of wooden bridges falling down on the Jubilee River. And somebody here took responsibility for them from the Environment Agency. And I have actually asked the question, but never been given an answer. And they will probably cost a couple of £1 million to replace. And they are rotten. They are 20 years old, they are rotten, and there is no provision for them. They're as rotten as the Environment Agency. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Knowles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Reading the report, the thing that jumps out with the report, first paragraph there, the council is effectively bankrupt. That's a serious lie. This is a position we're in. Now, if you wind back into history, and it's all in the report, 2020, we all know CIPFA came, did an examination of things, and they warned that we were heading towards Section 114 at that point. There was a meeting, the leader of the council was present, the leader of finance, the head of the Section 151 officer, etc. Although there's no minutes, there was a meeting. And luckily, it's terrible to say it, but COVID started to accelerate. So it put a bit of a hold on demand for services and allowed things to stabilise, but the Grants Act came in. But what is interesting is timing, because around that time, that meeting had happened, the bank reconciliation stopped. Strange. And also, this misallocation of funds started to happen spontaneously. And that's caused a lot of the problem, because all of the budgets we've looked at, which were presented, probably in good faith, were based on figures that didn't exist. It's now up to 25 million, not 16. This doesn't mean it's gone missing, as some people are saying. It's just capital used as revenue, which you're not allowed to do. And the reason you don't use capital for revenue is you can borrow capital. You can't borrow for revenue. So there is that angle there. What is weird is all of these misappropriated or misadjusted figures, none of them made the council's position look worse financially. That's very strange. I've never seen that before in my life. So the position over 4 years, because that's where we're looking at really, is 25 million less than it was reported. That's a board fact. So those figures that were projected as, if you like, the reserves all the way through that time, didn't exist. I'm led to believe that the knowledge about these things and the in-depth briefings didn't really move beyond the cabinet in the previous administration. So I do appreciate that. And it may have been the way things work, but it seems that nobody knew about those accounting areas. Nobody, absolutely nobody. Nobody knew. Andrew Johnson put in the newspaper that he didn't know either. Nobody knew, which I found strange. And I would really like us to move on and find out what exactly went on here, because it is odd. And I do know, and I do believe it when the Conservative members who were in the budget auditor administration at the time tell me that they didn't know, they didn't get any net briefing. So, but it's a good job that the new administration, which is the Liberal Democrats with the partnership cabinet, not independent and Liberal Democrat administration, just get that right. But it's a good thing that they won and they started asking questions, which probably, if you'd have been better informed, you may have asked the same questions and challenged things. But the challenge was going on, and it was going on in audit committee, it was going on everywhere. It was going on in this chamber. We were saying, no, this doesn't look right. And nobody was paying any attention. Brush it under the carpet, it's all right. I do, though, question when we need to stop making matters worse by wasting more money on solutions that probably won't work because we need government intervention. And at the moment, we've got the transformation programme, which is taking capital and spending it on revenue. It's all backwards. We've got to sell things to repay that. So I don't think these things can be solved by this kind of thing. I think we need to be bold, as it says in the report, bold action. But I do wish there's some, I think, inkling of responsibility. The key to this is that 6-year low and freezing of council tax, because the money that we're coming in and we've got now, and no matter what we increase, it has to be proportionally greater because of that hole in our finances. And I think really it was a vote winner, but I wish actually you didn't do it. You may have got out of power a bit earlier, but we wouldn't sit here now trying to work out how to pay for things, which is a tragedy. The cunning plan, though, will cost more money we haven't got. We need to increase income. Despite you like it or not, we need to increase council tax. We need to rebalance. There is no other option. We could sell absolutely everything, but even that wouldn't touch this. It wouldn't touch the sides of the debt. We could build multi-storey flats all over the golf course, and it still wouldn't touch the sides. The assumptions were so Monte Carlo, they call it in project management, when you go right to the right-hand edge of the possible return. Fabulous. We're all rich. But actually,
Councillor Knowles, could you come to the conclusion, please?
Can I just last words? I will say, it's the elephant in the room, the big problem we've got is we are losing our fabulous, exceptional Section 151 officer, which is an absolute tragedy for us because the credibility she brought to the council and to these dealings has been absolutely fabulous. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I would just remind people of the time because it's 5 minutes each and it's obviously going to be quite a long debate, I think. So please don't repeat things that have already been covered. Councillor Luxton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. According to the Lib Dems, this borough is in the middle of a financial crisis. This was not the case for the past when the Conservatives were in power. In only 18 months, we are considering declaring bankruptcy. What have you done to make such a mess in this short time? You have failed to gain control, and the situation has got only worse. COVID-19 and rising inflation were issues for the whole world for several years, a totally unexpected situation that even the Bank of England didn't focus. Yet the Conservative managed very successfully to navigate without plunging us into a situation the Lib Dems have now dropped us in. More importantly, throughout COVID and our time in power, we focused on what was important to us. Our residents needed. Adult and children's services should not have to take the hit for poor accounting. Now raising taxes, which we Conservatives never did to this extent while we were in power, by the way, to make up for accounting errors, when people are struggling with the cost of living, is disgraceful, and Lib Dem should be ashamed. The Conservatives managed to deliver what the residents needed, including upkeep of roads, highways, and parks, with the contracts that the Lib Dems say they cannot do. They should be focusing on how to fix the problems and do things like sort out the golf course, to pay down the debt instead of constant delays and now begging the government for money that won't come. You are blaming us for accounting issues when the simple fact is you all had access to it, or at least who were in power then, who were in the committees or who were in elected members, to the same information that we did, and yet failed to raise any issues or challenge at that time, but are happy to blame us for it afterwards, whilst we openly challenging you for a similar issue as soon as we were granted the chance to do so. So stop thinking of ways to blame us and start thinking about how you are going to fix this problem. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, Mr. Mayor, I know Christmas is coming up, but from what we've heard tonight, you'd think the pantomime was happening over there rather than Braithwaite, wouldn't it? Come on. It's just clear to see from this report how poor the financial management has been over the past 16 years. First, the Tories bankrupted the local council. Now we know that the national Tories have bankrupted the country. And in usual Tory fashion, they're leaving it for other people to fix the mess and to put the things right that they've done wrong. And don't take my words for it, but take the words. I'm glad you think it's funny, Conservative councillors. I don't think it's funny, and our residents don't think it's funny. But the key thing that we need to pay attention to here is what the independent CIPFA tells us. And what they say is that RBWM's ability to absorb pressures have been undermined by decisions dating back to 2010. They also go on to say how debt in this council in 2013 was just shy of £60 million, but a decade later is 204. So what on earth did you spend 150 million quid of our money on? A car park at Vickers Way that no one wanted? A leisure centre that should have been paid for by a land sale but fell woefully short because of your rubbish contracts? What else have we got for it? Where did you spend all of our money? I mean, people, surely you knew what was going on. And if you didn't, why did you not? The 151 officer put it really well in the opening scrutiny meeting last week. She said that some items that should have been classed as revenue were classed as capital, shifting the burden onto the debt pile with no asset value. Now, I will not ever claim to be a financial expert, but I know in my home finance, there is a massive difference between borrowing money for day-to-day spending and borrowing money to build an extension. Unfortunately, from what we've seen, the Conservatives don't know that. They've also said, as CIPFA, there's a significant backlog in the budget sheet reconciliations that is being brought up to date now by the Lib Dems. That backlog in reconciliations, CIPFA say, is another financial risk to the council, which will impact financial resilience this council has. But as we learned from the overview and scrutiny meeting, under the Conservatives, reconciliation sat with one person. And it wasn't realistic for them to do all the work. So when the Tories underfunded a department, giving massive, really important jobs to just one person to do, when they realise they've done it wrong, do they fix it? No, they let it carry on. So what do you expect to happen? We've heard councillors today saying that they're weary. I'm weary of the lack of understanding Conservatives shown of how council finances work. And from what we've heard tonight, no wonder we're in this mess. What I know from talking to residents really want to hear tonight is an apology from the Conservatives in the room. An apology for the financial mess that they've left residents in Windsor and Maidenhead. An apology for setting a culture and a structure where debt was allowed to balloon for 10 years, where we had no assets to back it up. And an apology for the £25 million worth of errors built up under the Conservatives' time in office. That is their legacy in 16 years in Windsor and Maidenhead. We know it. They know it. Residents know it. So will they now be brave enough to apologise, or are they just going to hide behind themselves yet again?
Councillor Wisdom da Costa.
Thank you, Chair. MP Reynolds, I think you were getting a bit of practice in for your next meeting in the House of Commons, no doubt. But interesting stuff. So I'm going to keep it really short and sweet. By the way, I don't know if the RBWM server is down at the moment because I've been trying to access some of my stuff on there. But okay, keep it short and sweet. Look, we're going through some difficult things. Officers and lead members are doing their best to put things right in difficult situations. But there's a huge level of complexity involved in all of this. So my question or my request is, rather than us sort of sitting here as councillors just worrying and not having any information, could we have a deep dive into different areas of different council meetings or at different sessions? I mean a deep dive, so don't cover everything in one session, just maybe finance or this area of service or this aspect of the CIPFA report. So just a question if we could do that just as briefings or at council meetings so that we are all really clear about the work that is going on to put things right. Thank you.
Thank you. And for the brevity, Councillor Hill.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for calling me to speak. RBWM is now a whopping 230 million in debt, with an annual shortfall in revenue for public services of 30 million. And after bank reconciliations not done since 2021, circa 25 million on its accounts adrift. This leaves us technically bankrupt and in need of emergency financial support from central government, coupled with rises in council tax above the 5% cap. The whole wretched situation has been gifted to us by the previous Conservative administrations. It's a matter of fact stated in the CIPFA report that RBWM was effectively bankrupt before May 2023 elections under the previous Conservative administration. The financial mess is a direct result of 6 years of council tax cuts and borrowing money to use to fund revenue expenditure in place of lost council tax income. As ever, the guilty have fled, leaving the innocent to fix the mess. The electorate have spoken, removing all but a few Conservative members. It's now incumbent on the remaining Conservative members to apologise for the perilous state of RBWM finances. And I'd like to know when they're going to do it. When are they going to apologise? Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bamonge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try and be brief as well and start by making something crystal clear. This administration did not inherit £10 million of reserves. This is a fantasy figure. It's a figure that's unaudited and is never going to be audited because those accounts are full part of this central government backstop, which means they will never be signed off by auditors and they'll never be signed off by the Audit and Governance Committee. So we need to draw a line under this. That 10 million is pure fantasy. The vast majority of that, the 25 million of accounting errors that we are talking about today, happened prior to the March 23 year end. They happened on the Conservatives' watch, and in all likelihood, as my colleague Councillor Hill has just said, we were already effectively bankrupt at that point. We did not have a general reserve. In all likelihood, we were spending money unlawfully on day-to-day expenditure. Effectively, if we didn't inherit £10 million, what did we inherit? I know it's often an often used cliche, but I really do feel the metaphor of the ticking time bomb is appropriate here. That's what we've inherited. It's taken quite a while, admittedly, to discover the bomb. It's taken a short while longer to unscrew the outer casing of the bomb, but now we've unscrewed it and the officers are working hard on it. We see there's just wires everywhere. It's a complete and utter shambles, to quote or misquote one of the Conservatives from a previous meeting. So, we're working hard to defuse the bomb. We've effectively now become the bomb disposal squad. But, ultimately, the line taken from the Conservatives this evening, and it's perfectly understandable why they take this line, is we're going to blame the bomb disposal squad for this bomb as it's going off. They're saying we've lost control. Yes, what we're seeing is a symptom of this ticking time bomb. It's starting to beep more and more. More and more frequently. The panic is setting in. We're desperately trying to we're desperately trying to defuse this situation. But why are we blaming the bomb disposal squad and not those that planted the bomb in the first place? It's beyond me to understand that. I spoke a lot about governance at the cabinet and the governance culture that existed at the time that could have allowed these sort of practices to occur. I'm not going to go into all that again now, but essentially I'm going to perform another cliche now and quote George Orwell, because I think the quote that comes to mind is that freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 = 4. We've given officers the freedom to tell it how it is now. 2 + 2 does equal 4, doesn't equal 5, certainly doesn't equal 3, and to hell with where the remainder goes. It equals 4. We have committed to fixing the mess. Part of that is discovery and discovering the full scale of the problem. We are doing that now. We are coming to the central government with our proposed solutions in this FISP. We need support to make this happen. I hope we can get support across the board, but it feels like that maybe is beyond some members this evening. Anyway, I'll leave my comments here.
Thank you. Councillor Werner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Over the last year and a half, significant action has been taken by the council's new administration to get the financial situation under control, making savings, transforming services, generating income. Part of that process was to do a balance sheet reconciliation, an audit of the accounts that hadn't been done since 2021. The result of that has been shocking. It's revealed hidden mistakes of £25 million. £25 million, that's practically a quarter of our annual budget. Now, you've heard about the £25 million from other speakers, but it has to be acknowledged that a figure of that size could never be covered by the council. So we do need the government's help. But I want to focus for a minute on what we're doing now that the £25 million has been exposed. I'm sure you've all read the challenging recovery plan that we're putting in place to improve the borough's finances. We're presenting that to the government because it will need their help to cover that 25 million. This follows an expert review of the council's finances by the CIPFA, who I'm sure you've all heard of. This review shows the council, it's basically been bankrupt for a few years now due to the financial situation caused by the Conservatives and inherited by us last year. The extent of it is just truly shocking. Nothing was in place. And unless tough decisions are taken now and we get that additional government support, then we are bankrupt. Building on the work we've already done over the last 18 months, the council's recovery plan outlined in the FISP, which I'm presuming that all councillors who can read have read it. It's framed around strengthening governance and financial control, genuine service transformation, efficiency, contract savings. Actually having people to manage contracts would be a help, which we've brought in. Optimising income and commercialisation, prioritising our capital programme, and driving value from our assets. No more so-called joint ventures for us. The report confirms, if you've read it, that past decisions by the Conservative Council were irresponsible and disastrous for the council's finances. There's no doubt about it. It also makes clear that the council will need substantial support from the government to avoid that bankruptcy in the short term and allow us to deliver our plan for sustainability. Despite that, all the work that has gone on to tackle the situation, this discovery of 25 million means that we need to take even more action to rectify these historic decisions. I was going to say that this also gives us a real opportunity for us to all work together on solutions, a truly one council kind of approach. So I've got to say, I am deeply, deeply disappointed in the complete failure of the Conservative councillors to even begin to understand local government finance and the effect of the decisions made by the leadership of their group. I don't hold you responsible for the decisions. You were bystanders, as was pointed out in a letter to the Maidenhead Advertiser. But you've still got to represent the Conservatives and, as has been suggested by a number of people, apologise for the mess that your colleagues got this council in. I'm making notes, but there were just too many. There was no 10 million in reserves. There was minus 15 million. The bankruptcy happened under the Conservatives You just didn't know that you were bankrupt. The Conservatives signed the contracts. That was one of the things. They are your contracts that we're having to deliver. The schedule for the sale of the golf course was agreed by the developer, by the Conservatives. There was no opportunity to bring it forward. The savings panel was not postponed for 6 months. In fact, the Conservatives didn't even have a savings panel. They don't seem to understand that they set the 2003-2004 budget. If you cannot interrupt, please, unless you want to apologise. Silence. Sad. I could go on with listing the complete inability of the Conservatives to understand the situation. It's just shocking. The idea of the Conservatives being the party of sound finance was exploded by the performance of the Conservatives over the last few years, both locally and nationally. And now at this meeting, they are proved that they are completely failing to start rebuilding their reputation. Apologise and apologise now, and then we can move on and work together to save the council.
Could you come to a close, please? It's not a point of order under the Constitution that I can see.
Time's up anyway.
I'm finished.
Yes. Councillor Carol Da Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've sat here and listened to quite a lot of mudslinging, and this council is in dire straits without a shadow of a doubt. We need to look for ways of improving life for our residents. I've heard calls for apologies and lack of responsibility. But at the end of the day, as far as I'm aware, there's only one person in this room who was a cabinet member during any of that time. And, you know, if there is an apology to be made, maybe that person should be the one to do it. And then I'm not naming anybody. I'm sure that person knows who they are. I do think we need to put council tax up radically. And even if we do, we will still be the lowest council tax in this area. And I would support any move to do that, because at the end of the day, taxes pay for services. We can't get away from it. It's just life. And I do have a couple of requests. One is that I would ask the administration that we protect the least able to pay any increases within our borough, and that we do protect those people that are on council tax support, and that actually even look at raising the threshold so that the least able to pay are protected. My second inquiry is it possible to find out if there's any way of having any financial recompense through liability insurances with some of the people who took responsibility for this decision-making and clearly flaws in their ability to manage such a large portfolio? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Thank you. As councillors, we have two roles. Simply put, to support residents and to support the council ensuring it's run effectively. In the second part, I see my role as a critical friend. I attend cabinets regularly and I prod and probe. Outside this, I ask questions of cabinet members and officers if I don't understand something or see something that can be improved. What I've heard here this evening from some is a misunderstanding of the situation we're in, and the lack of recognition for the hard work that officers have made in what must be a really depressing situation of every time you lift up another stone, you discover something rotten underneath. And a lack of recognition of the detailed plans that they have been working on and have drawn up and the action that has been taken.
We are a bit like the emperor with no clothes. So the groupthink was everything's fine, the emperor looks great, but actually, and that's what we were told, but it's proved not to be. Council has been shown to be naked of money, reserves, naked of robust financial systems, and naked of adequate staffing. Councillor Wilson, in a recent cabinet meeting, used the analogy of us being on life support. And I thought that are in critical care. But what I've heard tonight from some councillors is a refusal to accept the professional's opinion on the patient, the equivalent of the doctor, in this case CIPFA, who've laid bare how ill we actually are and why. So here are my comments, questions, suggestions as a critical friend to the paper that's in front of us. I am sorely disappointed that despite requesting at Cabinet and Corporate and being assured, of course, it'll happen, there's still no reference to communication that I can see having read through this. We have to clearly explain to residents why they will be faced with soaring council tax hikes, why it will take time to restore services to what they expect and deserve. I urge that we build into our costs a pamphlet leaflet to go to every home in the borough, so that those who are not on social media are kept as informed as those who are. And what are we aiming for once we get through all of this pain? What's the vision for RBWM? Should we be looking to merge with another authority? Would that be a more efficient use of resources by sharing fixed costs? Is there another model without merging? Has this been considered? And something I don't understand looking at this, and I think it would be good to have clarity on, is how the following all fits together and what trumps what. So the transformation strategy, the future shape RBWM, the financial improvement to sustainability plan, the action tracker, the QAR, the independent board, cabinet, corporate, council. It would be useful if at some time we could see how all of this meshes together and it works as a coherent whole. I would say the phrase penny wise, pound foolish comes to mind in thinking about the independent board, which is going to cost us money. But boy, if we get independents who've been through something similar and can look at this with slightly more objectively, they might be able to save us millions. So for me, that's a really good investment. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coe.
The Tory narrative, which we've heard repeated here tonight and on many other occasions previously, is that the Lib Dems crashed the car within 10 minutes of getting the keys. In reality, we got the keys, we went to the car park, and we found that the wheels had been stolen, the car was on blocks, the tank was empty, and the battery was flat. We didn't get to crash the car because it was already broken. 200 million of debt, 25 million of accounting errors. Let's nail this down. CIPFA are clear when those accounting errors occurred. They occurred when the Conservatives were in charge. 30 million of missing income, unfunded, reckless council tax cuts made by the Conservatives with no real idea of how they were going to fund them in the long run. 14 million of interest payments going out of the council every year, a budget of around 100 million. And hundreds of millions lost on asset sales. CIPFA are really, really clear. This situation occurred and these mistakes were made when the Conservatives were in charge. Tonight we've heard nonsense on the golf course sale. We've heard nonsense about a £10 million reserve that never existed. And we've heard nonsense about annual surpluses which never occurred. Let's be clear, there weren't budget surpluses. There wasn't a £10 million reserve. And the golf course is raising £400 million less than those who claimed to have organised the deal said in the newspaper it would. They claimed 500 million. It's delivering 100 million. Not only that, Conservative policy was actively dangerous. Conservatives cut budgets for maintenance. First, they tried to put them into capital, then they were told they couldn't, so then they put them back into revenue, but didn't fund them. And only a few weeks ago, we had a situation where a lamppost in Windsor fell over. And what did we discover? They hadn't even been properly inspecting the lampposts. What we've heard from the Conservatives tonight is more of the same hubris which got the borough where it is today. All bar two of the Conservatives opposite voted at some point for the decisions that got the council in the mess it is in. Those councillors should apologise to residents. Instead, they've doubled down on the same fantasy that is the cause of the problem.
Thank you. Councillor Reeves.
Thank you very much. So I just wanted to reflect, we've been asked as an administration, what have we been doing since we took over? And I had a thought about that, and I think I have an answer. Well, what we haven't been doing is hiding behind the shadows of artificially kept low council tax to buy votes. That's one thing we haven't been doing. And we are actually putting together what I see is an adult and fiscally responsible plan, a difficult plan, which none of us wanted to actually have to implement, to repair the budget that was clearly held together by a previous administration using sellotape and double-sided sticky tape. We will still be the lowest council tax in the neighbouring councils. I know it's going to be a shock to the residents, and it's something that I didn't want to become a councillor to have to do. But I know I have to be an adult in this situation, and I have to step forward and support a plan that has been pulled together by conscientious officers, a conscientious administration that really do own what is in front of us. We look at the budget and we're told that we brought this budget down and we brought us into bankruptcy. Actually, the CIPFA report is quite clear that the 2023-24 report required £10.5 million worth of savings to balance, but without the plans to show how this would be achieved. Well, that's one thing we have done and we're achieving is a plan, something that CIPFA have clearly said was not in place with the 2023-2024 budget. I think I can recall that was not our budget, that was their budget. Many of those savings have not been achieved and costs in many areas have outstripped the budget, most notably in the demand-led statutory services, the things that we really, really need to provide, adult social care and children's services. These things have outstripped every council in this country. But one thing, unlike other councils, we did not have any, and I mean any reserves at all to weather this storm that we faced. There are plenty of other contracts which had less income, £500,000 through our leisure contract. We pay 0.6 million due to haulage and vehicle costs on waste contract. That's quite synonymous, or waste contract. Parking income is 1.2 million below the budget due to a reduced uptake. Now, I know they can't control that, but if you're banking on 1.2 million to come from it, you really should have a good plan and an understanding of what that is going to deliver and how it's going to deliver it. So what have we done? We have actually stepped forward and taken a responsibility for what needs to be done to help our residents stabilise and create the foundation that they deserve for their council and their budget. So going forward, we can support this council and the officers to provide the services that every resident deserves. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tizzy, Julian Tizzy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to, I won't repeat things that have been said already because, but I'd just like to build on something that Councillor Reeves has just introduced, which is what are we doing and what have we been doing? Just to reiterate that almost immediately when we took over in May, action was taken, including setting up the spending review panel very early, doing a root and branch investigation into the finances, building that finance team, and having to deal with things like the fact that there were 3 years of unaudited accounts, and that we had to negotiate with the government and do all of these other things as well. And by the time it was presented in October 23, this plan was very much in flight, and it's still one of the lines that the Conservatives are holding to, that we didn't do anything until that point, until they found out about it. That's absolutely false. Now, the blame is always, the blame or the upside is always, it's the councillors, it's us councillors, and the officers we just have to thank. And I would like to take this opportunity to single out one officer in particular who deserves considerable praise, and that is the Section 151 officer, Elizabeth Griffith, who, as we know, is heading off. And I think that's a real shame. And she has been absolutely brilliant, in my opinion, in helping bring us back from the brink, and will be a big loss and a big gain to wherever she goes next. I'd just like to put that on record, if I may. I was going to say some more, but I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To discuss some numbers, I like numbers. Over the 10 years that Conservatives were in from 2010 to 2020, they effectively reduced council tax by 25%, as opposed to what inflation would cause it to increase. That, as we know, is 30 million a year. Our effectively police services, our resources, a very large chunk of the budget that goes to a lot of the things that residents see are transport, neighbourhood services, planning, property services, housing, finance. These things are underpaid for in RBWM. They've got an overall budget of 23 million a year. We'd be able to double that if we had these things paid for, if we'd been paying the council tax just to inflation kept steady as it would have increased. Now, as part of that, you have finance. We wouldn't have this 25 million problem if we had the officers to be able to account for these mistakes and had enough resource. That would have been helped resolve. A lot of our issues in funding of adult and child social care is at root due to housing, again, funded from this group. We've discussed the golf course, 100 million. If we got that today, that's 7 million a year back to the budget. That's not even enough to account for the adult and child social care overspend that happened that the last Conservative budget didn't account for. There is just reams and reams of these mistakes, which are all down to we haven't had the funding to be able to resource things we need to be able to grow and account for in a growing society. And we need to make up that deficit so that we can kind of grow RBWM in the future and be able to look after our neighbourhoods.
Thank you. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep this brief. I'd like to ask the Lib Dem administration, how can we go from £16 million in debt in November, in less than 2 weeks, it becomes 25 million. Now, is this going to be the final figure? What will it become next month or in January 2025? I seriously doubt the EFS that you're requesting from central government, emergency funding support, will be given, or it will be the amount that is required. I probably think it's going to be in the order of £50 million. So what is the plan B if you don't receive that money? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moriarty.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I was privileged last year to be elected by my peers to become chair of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Panel shortly after the election. Now, for those listening that don't know what that panel does or might not be aware of it, in short, the remit is to look at the operation of the council, its people, its technology, its use of resources more generally. Now, a central part of that is reviewing the budgeting process before it's presented to full council. We'll be doing that shortly, and scrutinising the quarterly performance reports, including financial performance. Now, I don't suppose anyone in this room would question the idea of keeping an eye on performance against budget, but perhaps it's worth explaining why I think it's important. Now, I don't see it as a thing to stick to hit people with. I don't even think it's there to create headlines or to score points. What I think it's there to do is to make sure that we are using the best possible data and information about performance so that the council, the cabinet, members, officers can make as informed decision as possible in pursuit of our aims. It's called evidence-based decision making. So a few months ago, when the panel started to hear about the financial errors that had been identified and that there was a backlog of unaudited accounts, alarm bells started ringing. Perhaps it wouldn't be so bad. Just a bit of tidying up, some admin errors. I never imagined it would be £25 million across several years. That's not insignificant. Now, to help those who may not be experts in financial reporting, or even some people in the room who might not be experts, what these errors amount to is significant areas of spend not appearing in those budget performance reports that I spoke about before, that were, I assume, scrutinised during that period. We know that it's not unusual to see councils with in-year overspends, but the reality was the overspends in those reports were hideously more than reported. The financially stable council we were told we were inheriting was, in fact, a house of cards stuck together with cheap glue. A single gust of wind would see everything tumble down, and the external environment, as we've heard in the last 18 months, has proved to be that gust of wind. Yes, other councils are facing similar challenges, but they're able to lean into some financial foundation to go into those headwinds. We're nowhere near that. So I say to my predecessors, at best, you didn't know what was going on. At worst, you hope no one would notice. The reality is that those scrutiny panels may as well have been moving magnetic numbers about on the fridge and forming opinions on that. So what were those decisions that were made? Well, the one that stands out and has been talked about a lot tonight, and CIPFA themselves reference it, is the decision around council tax. Now, as a report tells us, no administration has ever decided to reduce council tax or freeze it for 6 years on the trot. In a series of boasting messages, we residents were told to marvel at having the lowest council tax outside of London. In fact, we've been asked to celebrate it again tonight. Now, perhaps the emails I received in the first weeks as a councillor about the potholes, the overflowing bins, the stretched services, tired-looking streets and blocked drains point towards what those claims were. Cheap tricks to win votes. We've all met that person in the pub who offers to get the big round in, putting the round on the credit card with no plan on how they're going to pay that back. That's tomorrow's problem. Cheap tricks to win friends. Thank you very much. But these always have a habit of catching up with you. So here we are. So where are we? Well, these decision makers are probably not in this room. Perhaps they found their comeuppance in past elections. Many of them certainly aren't here to answer for what we are now left with. So what is that exactly? Well, we have a workforce stretched beyond measure, archaic technology to work with, no money to invest, having to ask central government for support, our fate left to the hands of others, a decision that we can only attempt to influence. So is Section 114 inevitable? Who knows? But what I know is that the way out of this is not to repeat the mistakes of the past. The years of financial irresponsibility are over. That's clear to me through the work that the lead member for finance, the wider cabinet, RBWM CEO and his senior team have shown in the last few months particularly, but across the last year, typified by the proactive move to get CIPFA in to review our financial health and map out a way to financial strength. But how do we turn that plan, that map, into action? A key question that the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Panel asked last week. So here's my take on that discussion that followed. I think we can all broadly agree on why we're doing this. I suppose we might disagree on some of the what's, but I don't think that's going to be the key focus or the key issue that will make the difference. As a few of my colleagues have alluded to tonight, I think it's about how we do this. Things must change. Someone once said, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. We have to repair the damage of the past decade, build stronger, open, productive relationships between members, officers, parish councils, charitable partners, stakeholder groups, community action groups, and most importantly, residents. Every single one of those groups.
Could you draw it to a close, please?
Yep, last bit, probably more. Every single one of people in those groups are going to have to play a role if we're going to change this. So I support this motion, but more importantly, I would take the additional step, and I would urge others in the room to do similar and support anyone in this room or watching or reading about this who's willing to roll their sleeves up and make a difference. I will be right behind you, adding as much power to your elbow as I can muster. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've heard lots about what may have happened in the past, what could have happened, and what did happen in the past. It's time to move on. In the interests now of transparency moving forward, I think it's really important that this council publishes the minutes of their spending review so we can actually see what is happening and what decisions are being made to actually fix and what the council is doing to control costs. At the moment, there seems to be little action really in making progress with reducing the costs that the council is spending. It's now November and you've been in power since May of last year. It's time now to stop passing the blame to us and for you to all start taking proper responsibility for the role you've got. And it's now time also to start publishing a full draft budget. We want to see how you're actually going to deliver this budget properly for next year. And I'm fully expecting that that will be a proper and fully balanced budget. When we were in the hot seat and in administration, November was the time when we first saw the draft budget. That hasn't happened yet, and I'm frankly really surprised that we haven't seen any sign of that document yet. Now, budgets are always based on assumptions, they're always based on estimates of what people using highly skilled financial and professionally qualified people actually think will happen over that next financial period. And I want to understand what assumptions you're going to put into your budget to make it work, because it's really important that we have a very clear pathway forward if you are going to take the correct action to deliver this council through the problems that you are saying it has. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Amy Tizzy.
Thank you. A councillor said they were weary. I'm really not surprised with the mental gymnastics that you have to go through to excuse the deplorable behaviour of your predecessors over more than a decade. I do feel a bit sorry for you because clearly as backbenchers you were kept in the dark, and the ones that were really responsible have all run away, although I hear one of them might be sitting in Parliament. Yes, all councils are facing the effects of historic cuts to local government funding. That's another thing we can blame your colleagues for in government. And yes, all councils are facing the challenges of rises in demand and market costs for adults and children's services. But the difference is that literally no other council in this land committed such a devastating act of self-harm as the previous Tory administration did when they cut the council tax over and over again. Your predecessors were so proud of keeping council tax low, but keeping services high, and that might have worked for a little while, but the wheels started to fall off. You know, you only have to look at the last few years with universal services having to be cut, the officer corps has been hollowed out, with lack of capacity, maintenance has just fallen off a cliff, all of that. So you say you're weary, well, I am angry. I am angry. I'm angry that you have made us be in a situation where instead of increasing council tax by a small amount that families could possibly bear, that we're going to have to do it in one big chunk. I'm really angry that we're facing Section 114 and the non-statutory services that we know help our families to stop needing the statutory services could be at risk. I'm angry that we can't deliver the services that the residents deserve and expect from us. And I'm angry that the plans that we had when we took over this council can't be delivered yet. I'm angry that arrogant, ignorant Tory leaders of the past who've come and gone used RBWM as their financial playground. And I'm angry that some of the councillors in this room clearly haven't even read any of the papers that have been provided to them. And that's so obvious. But you know what? Anger doesn't get you anywhere. Anger just eats you up inside, and so we have to move on, and we have to channel that anger, and we're going to use it to sort out the 16 years of Tory mess, and we're going to take this council forward into the future.
Thank you. There's nobody else asking to speak, so I'll ask the seconder of the motion, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I came into politics 6 years ago to add my voice to righting the wrongs that I saw being done in the country. And it's been a journey. Now I'm helping to fix the mess of a historical accounting and financial management catastrophe beyond anything that I came across in my previous career. We've heard this evening about the cuts upon cuts upon cuts, debt upon debt upon debt, no money for critical maintenance, services cut back to way less than residents expect. And we've heard that this is a financial crisis created by short-sighted, self-serving decisions of the former Conservative administrations. It's crystal clear the Conservatives left this council bankrupt. Fortunately, the new Lib Dem administration and partnership cabinet have started the process of rebuilding a council worthy of the Royal Borough. So now we have a clearer view of the situation. It really was a mess. And we have a simple choice. Either we approve this plan or we issue a Section 114 notice. What does that mean? That would mean we would hand control over to national government and the commissioners. Having gained an understanding of what that would involve, not only is it not what I'm here for and what I want, but I believe it's not in the best interest of residents either. We councillors, and that's all of us in this room, are democratically elected to represent our residents. And I'm sure each of us know our residents and our wards better than anyone else from outside. We have a very strong case for our ask from government, and I hope that national government can understand what we need and why we need it. It's also clear that we need to rebuild trust in RBWM with residents. A change is happening. We are being open about the scale of the challenges in detail. The budget monitoring report and the quarterly assurance report are really important parts of that process to report on progress and to monitor performance. The governance, scrutiny and transparency that we have put in place since May 2023 are strong. A full transformation project has been launched, a real one, that has been agreed service by service. And this is delivering systems improvements, modernisation and efficiency gains and savings. And we're reporting on it regularly. All this put in place by the new administration from scratch with no money left and no spare capacity. We need to rebuild services and resources in the council. CIPFA, and we've used that abbreviation a lot, that is the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, the top professional body in this field. And they state in their report, the finance and other support teams, along with other areas in the council, have been left with significant capacity gaps because of years of cumulative cuts and are understaffed and underskilled to provide the level of support for a council of this size. Not my words, CIPFA. They go on to highlight areas where there are single points of failure in finance, procurement, property and legal. These are real risks and they need to be addressed, and we are addressing those risks. Indeed, this also means that in some cases, the minimum viable council is actually larger than it is currently. The FISP is a thorough document which, together with the actions tracker, shows national government that we have a detailed plan, and I hope they will be minded to support us in agreeing to support us fully in this journey of fixing the mess and rebuilding for the future of the borough. It's a strong plan for the recovery and restoration of RBWM into a council that this very special and much loved borough of ours really deserves. Together with officers, this administration is working to provide the solid foundation for a brighter future. This paper is a critical step towards fixing the mess. Therefore, I support and second all the recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, would you like to sum up?
Mr. Mayor. A lot of what I've said I was going to sum up with has been said again and again. So I'm just going to take a couple of points that maybe haven't been addressed fully. I would just like you to remember the line, the first line of the executive summary that says, given the state of the finances in the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead that was inherited by the new administration, CEO and CFO in the summer of 2023, a section 114 notice could be required. That is what CIPFA have said. Unaudited accounts did state in 22-23, unaudited, that there was 10 million in reserves. Unfortunately, historic corrections of 25 million have been discovered for that time. So you could say that the reserves could possibly have been minus 15 million at that point. The golf club, yeah, that was agreed in 2018 by the last administration, the administration before that. The terms agreed take the delivery of the return of any substantial returns out of our hands. We can't change that. And yes, as I said in my report, every council is suffering increased costs for social care and housing. But if we had an equivalent council tax of the lowest outside London, you know, above us, it wouldn't be an issue. We would be able to function as a viable council and provide those services. I would also like to refer my Conservative colleagues to the minutes of my budget responses between 2012 and 2023, where I'm sure you will find many challenges to the decisions that were going to be made. There was a mention of increase of debt of 16 to 25,000. That's not a debt. Those were the corrections. If I bear with me, so let me explain, because a lot of people have mentioned this. On the close of the multiple years financial accounts, transactions deemed as revenue costs have been identified on the capital ledger. In discussions with auditors, it has been agreed that despite it being historical, it is advised to take those transactions as revenue costs in 23-24. The capital funding allocated against those costs will now be allocated against relative capital assets over the lifetime of that asset. Conversely, other assets have had to have their lives shortened because they had incorrectly been given a useful life of 50 years. Clearly, in the case of assets outside of new buildings, this is incorrect, and we need to put that right as well. Yet another example of the true cost of our aspiring capital expenditure being hidden. We're already looking at ways to protect the most financially vulnerable from any increase in council tax, and it will be included in plans going forward. Council funding has decreased by 30%. Our council tax has decreased by around 25% against the average inflation. We have to go to government to enable RBWM to survive. What agreement is made is out of our hands, but we have to put ourselves in the best position possible to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. The recommendations are set out in the agenda papers.
Can we have a named vote, please? Named vote.
Is that, yeah, okay. Thank you. Yes, could you carry out a named vote, please?
Of course, thank you. So the recommendations are before you on the screen. So as usual, I will read out your names in alphabetical order. If you could please tell me if you're for, against or abstaining on the above recommendation. Councillor Baskerville.
For.
Councillor Bermange.
For.
Councillor Blundell.
For.
Councillor Bond.
For.
Councillor Bra.
For.
Councillor Buckley.
For.
Councillor Carpenter.
For.
Councillor Coe.
For.
Councillor Conoram. Councillor Carol da Costa.
For.
Councillor Wisdom da Costa.
For.
Councillor Cross.
For.
Councillor Devon Davies.
For.
Councillor Karen Davies.
For.
Councillor Douglas.
For.
Councillor Gosling.
For.
Councillor Grove.
For.
Councillor Hill.
For.
Councillor Howard.
For.
Councillor Hunt.
Against.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Knowles.
For.
Councillor Larkham.
For.
Councillor Luxton.
Against.
Councillor Majid.
For.
Councillor Moriarty.
For.
Councillor Price.
For.
Councillor Reeves.
For.
Councillor Reynolds.
For.
Councillor Sharp.
Against.
Councillor Shaw.
For.
Councillor Gertch Singh.
For.
Councillor Kashmir Singh.
Abstain.
Councillor Amy Teasey.
For.
Councillor Julian Teasey.
For.
Councillor Walters.
Against.
Councillor Werner.
For.
Councillor Wilson. 4.
You probably need the mark.
I don't think. The result is 33 for, 4 against and 1 abstention. So the motion is carried. That was of necessity a long debate. Does anybody wish to take a comfort break, which will give us a chance to stretch our legs, or? Okay, there's clearly. If we could all come together, please, to continue the meeting. We now come to agenda item 8, which is the report regarding the council's constitutional amendments. Councillor Beaumont, would you like to introduce this item?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will do. So this is the latest report reviewing the Constitution and proposing a number of amendments. As with the previous report that we brought to Council a few months ago, these amendments have been discussed at length by the Constitution Working Group, which is hopefully, as you're aware, is a cross-party group to try and make sure that we have a degree of consensus within that group on any proposals that come forward. So this is the product of the latest 2 Constitutional Working Group meetings. There's a number of amendments here. I won't go into great detail because there isn't really time for me in this introduction to do that. I suppose just to speak briefly, we've got amendments relating to specific panels. So first off, the development management committees. There's 2 amendments here. One is one which may gather some interest this evening, which is in reference to technical briefings and the proposal that we remove those technical pre-briefings, which the public may not be aware happen, but they are basically private sessions which occur in the hour before the public meeting. It was thought by the Constitutional Working Group that on balance it would be better that the discussions, or to ensure that discussions do all happen in public. And we thought that there was a risk that this technical briefing was potentially limiting the amount of public debates which occurs on some items. So this proposal would also allow the committee to potentially start earlier at 6 p.m. rather than 7 as well. So there'd be an added benefit there. Also, in relation to development management committees, we're looking at expanding the pool of councillors who can call in planning applications. Currently, it's only councillors within a ward. The proposal here is that councillors in neighbouring wards could also call in something, which we feel is important in some cases where an application in an adjacent ward could potentially have a direct impact on that ward. Obviously, it sets out that they need to inform the actual ward councillors first that they intend to do that, and I think that's an important courtesy. With ONS panels, very, very quickly, it's just to change the name of people to adults, children and health. It's not purely window dressing, it's also about a realignment of some of the functions that or services that the ONS panel scrutinise. So there's a bit of a shift around between that panel and place. Moving to council, full council, and specifically petitions, we are now suggesting that the lead petitioner on a petition which gains 1,000 signatures will be given the option to potentially take that instead of to full council to cabinet, completely at their discretion, because in some cases what they're asking for is an executive decision, and actually it may be more expedient and streamlined to actually bring it to cabinet so that a substantive decision might be made by that body, but it will be left entirely up to them. Also, we want to make some rule changes relating to the motions which can be proposed during the debate. We're suggesting we will allow the cabinet member to submit an alternative motion on notice so that all members are given proper notice of that motion as an alternative to the motion which is in the officer's report. Also, a recognition that the officer's report should be written in consultation with the cabinet member. A very short one about the fact that we've started we were following the practice of where full councillors only asked to note a report, that generally there shouldn't be any need for debate on that. Moving to a slightly obscure part of the Constitution, but essentially it's one of these things that you find out through when it actually comes up and realise doesn't seem to quite function properly, and that's an issue of out-of-time mileage claims. So members are entitled to mileage claims, have to be submitted within 6 months. Currently, if that deadline is missed, it actually falls on cabinet meeting as a, in public, as having a full debate about whether to grant the extension and allow that claim to go through despite missing the deadline. The proposal here is actually that should be for the the monitoring officer in consultation with the mayor.
Councillor Vermont, could you come to a close, please?
Yeah, and I think that basically covers all the main points. So as always, I, by sheer luck, managed to fill 5 minutes. Thank you.
Councillor Hunt. Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry, I'm jumping the gun. Seconded by Councillor Werner, and you reserve. Yep. Councillor Hunt.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Beaumont. With regard to when I get this thing going, the relation to the application calling in, the call-in, could you look at, and I would appreciate, if it included the words where it impacts residents of their own ward? I say this because I have a large ward. Now, in parts of Hurley, which is my ward, wouldn't impact anyone on Cox Green, but Cox Green is a neighbour of Hurley and the Walthams ward. So you can see where it makes sense. If you could just have that amendment in that, please, I would appreciate it.
Thank you. Councillor Walters.
And I think it's best to.
Sorry, apologies, Councillor Walters. Could you just start again? Your microphone wasn't turned on.
Oh, it's not.
Apologies.
Okay,
it's on now.
No, the system at the moment, I think, works perfectly well. And to spread it out to other wards, I think it's just a waste of time. I really do. I mean, it really just concerns the ward. Do you want to call it in or not? Does the person in Coxley want to know what's going on in, I don't know, Maiden or something? It really is that. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Wisdom da Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Beaumont, this is a great piece of work, and to all of your committee, most of it I actually agree with, and I think it's a great move forward. There is one concern I do have, though, it's related to the development management panel meetings, and it's this. The pre-meeting is a safe space for people who think, who deliberate over a period of time, and also they can ask questions which they might, people might regard as stupid. They might themselves regard as stupid. So it gives them that safe space to think about things, to work things through before they get to the main meeting. Now, I do agree that sometimes discussions happen in that pre-meeting, which should actually take place in the main meeting. But that loss of safe space is a problem, because when you get to the panel, you're going to have a longer panel, pressured panel, in public, on screen, on broadcast to the world. So people are not going to be able to really work things. Some people won't. I won't, because I'm a long, slow thinker. Whereas Carol, my wife, is Councillor da Costa, I should say, is a quick thinker. So this wouldn't really work for some people. So I would ask you to reconsider those changes to find another solution. I'd also ask, did you actually talk to all of the panel members to say actually what would work? How could we make this work with you? So yeah, everything is great. Big concerns that actually we're going to get the wrong results, or rather push towards officer recommendation, which we don't necessarily always agree with. So that will be the trend, will be to swing the decision more towards officer recommendation, which is a concern.
Thank you. Councillor Coe.
Not live. Oh, that's it. Yeah, I'm really happy with the call-ins. I'm just driving past Bray Studios now all the time, and obviously that's a development which is impacting on neighbouring wards, I imagine, and not quite seen from space, but probably seen from quite a few wards in Maidenhead. And then the mileage thing I think is really good, because when that came to cabinet, it felt really uncomfortable that we might have to decide about another councillor who maybe was in a different party from us, and that should be taken to somebody neutral. I'm really pleased with.
Thank you. Councillor Amy Tizzy.
Thank you. Really welcome the changes to allowing neighbouring councillors to call in issues. Councillors Price and Carpenter, and I hope don't mind me naming you, our ward actually is on the same road. One side of the road belongs to Karen and I, that's our ward. The other side of the road is Helen and Alison. And I think, you know, in those sorts of situations, it makes absolute sense for us to be able to call in with their knowledge, with their full knowledge and discussion. I'm really concerned of the suggestion that the safe space of the meeting before a planning meeting, you know, you really risk sounding like you're predetermining your decision. If you're saying all of the thought and the consideration is given before the planning meeting, that really shouldn't be happening. You should be emailing the officers with your questions, your technical questions and things before, to allow them the time to come and have the answers to your questions. And so yeah, again, I welcome that change. And also, you know, a slightly earlier start means slightly earlier finish for officers and for everybody, which is better for work-life balance. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reeves.
I feel that my thunder has just been stolen by Councillor Tizzy here. Very much the same point. As a member of the planning panel for the last year and a half and experiencing these technical briefings, I do believe that actually those could be presented with the sense of transparency within the actual panel. Absolutely agree that you should not be coming predetermined, and therefore if you're asking these sort of questions and effectively constructing your thinking within those technical briefings, then you're not giving the credence to the public speakers when they appear before you at the panel. You should not be making any decision until you have fully assessed everything that comes before you. And these public speakers are coming before you to present additional information. Technical questions, I personally totally agree, should be asked to the officers with plenty of time for them to look it up, for them to consider it in advance of the meeting. And that can easily be done via email if you are reading up on your planning applications in advance, and not just coming before the technical briefing and still asking questions about technical questions. And about the call-in, I heard what my fellow councillor in Hurley and Waltham was saying about not impacting Cox Green. Being the actual councillor for Cox Green, I recall the Lilybrook development that is sitting right between our wards. It's actually within hours, but it goes down Lilybrook Avenue, and that is in Hurley and Waltham's. And numerous occasions when I was canvassing, we approached by residents of that street to Councillor Moriarty and myself in Cox Green to help support them because they didn't feel represented by their ward councillor in and around that development. They said we were the first people to actually talk to them openly about it. So, and just to quote what it says quite clearly here, there's no amendment needed. It says, however, that there are occasions when planning applications could be in one ward, however, have consequential effects on the neighbouring ward. I think it quite clearly says it already, that it would have consequential effects on the neighbouring ward. So therefore, if it was being an application in Hurley as a Cox Green ward councillor, that would not have consequential effects on us. So I think it's perfectly written and doesn't need any amendments. Thank you very much, and pleased to have it so that we can actually get through planning meetings earlier rather than later.
Thank you. Councillor Knowles.
Mr. Mayor, I was actually on planning when these were introduced, these technical briefings we're talking about, way back in 2019 after the election. The reason I remember them being brought in is back then there was no mandatory training to go on that panel. In fact, we all relied on Councillor Hilton's encyclopedic knowledge and his big box file all through the meetings. So it was thought that the technical briefs would allow people to ask the technical questions before the meeting. And and successful it was to a degree. But I think really now with the mandatory training that's in place, there's less need for it. I certainly feel more equipped than I did back in 2019, having gone back onto the panel. So I think really the need for it is kind of gone with modern communications. With the Windsor and Ascot Development Panel, we're going to develop a Teams area where we'll work with the planning officers, where things will be uploaded so they can be shared in advance of the meeting in the development stage of the presentations. We've done a similar sort of thing anyway with before the chair of the committee's meeting with the officers anyway. And that's brought out from some of the members of the panel some really intelligent questions, which the officers have been able to incorporate into the presentation. So that's really where it works, I think. On the question there at the Windsor and Ascot panel, we discussed it at the last meeting and we all voted that it was a good thing to do. These things are always under review, but I think it's a way forward. We've got modern communications. We can share things far more easy than back in 2019. And I think it's a modern way of working. And it saves time because we can start the meeting earlier. So it's better for us, it's better for the council officers and probably better for the public as well. You don't have to sit till 10 o'clock to find out if they can put a conservatory up. Okay, so they're good there. The call in, it is, like you said, it is designed to be adjacent boundaries. It's not deciding that I want to call in something in Raysbury because there's a river between us and a lot of road to get there, because that would be daft, unless somebody was going to build a 30-foot pier in the river. So therefore, it has to be quite objective, really, and not just a matter of opinion. So I think really that's a sensible thing. These are all changes which I think are positive. And I certainly think the planning panels are developed really well. Having had a year or so off and then coming back on, it was a bit of an eye-opener how things have progressed. And I think some of the veteran members of the panel that sit with me at the moment will probably agree that it's changed a bit and it's become good debate, very good debate, and less sort of posturing about it. So I will fully support the changes. I think they're really good ideas. And everything is changed, isn't it? Everything gets tweaked. Yes, you can always improve something. If something can't be improved, it means it's deceased. And the council is still going on at the moment, money. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wisdom da Costa, you have already spoken in this debate and there are very limited.
Yes, but there are a couple of misunderstandings. So I'm wondering if you referred my points.
Is it? If this is a personal explanation, then you have a minute.
Okay, thank you. So it's just really, we're not talking about predetermination, but really the issue that we're not planning experts. The level and body of planning law and technicalities is enormous. There's no way that anybody here would become a planning expert unless it already is their profession. And then you've got rapid changes in the law. So the point was that you cannot pick up on some of these technical points, but you have to be told, we draw your attention to this feature. So that this is not about predetermination. It's not about not reading the issues in advance. It is about the fact that we're not experts.
Thank you. Councillor Carol da Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just adding on to the comment that Councillor da Costa said then, if you're a sub on the planning meeting, you may not have read all the papers that far in advance if you're subbing at late notice. So that's something else that we need to take into account. But the point I was going to make was that I was a little bit disappointed that we haven't decided to make a cut-off with any business that's being dealt with at 11 o'clock. I was invited on to the meeting to look at how the constitution might be changed, but unfortunately I wasn't given the links to join. So I was unable to make my points within that meeting. So I'd just like to have it on record that I didn't have the opportunity to make those points at the time. And I believe quite strongly that decision-making deteriorates the longer you are awake and the longer you're working. And we need to take into account that some of our officers are working from early in the morning till late at night, and then they have to get up again the next day. And some of the members who also have full-time jobs and children to look after could have their decision-making affected by long hours.
Thank you. Councillor Walters, as I said before, the same applies to you. You wouldn't normally. Is it a personal explanation about something that's been misunderstood?
It is, yeah. Chairman, on the
I'm sorry, Councillor Walters, I'm advised that that wouldn't be appropriate to speak again.
What wouldn't, why won't you? I don't understand, I just want a minute to talk, and for God's sake.
You have already spoken in the debate.
I know, but I mean, it's just an explanation. I agree with the calling now because the word consequential and labour are there. But what I was going to say is that this could cause extra staff costs to do more applications.
Councillor Walters, I have been advised and I have made a decision.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Councillor Werner, you're the seconder.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just to pick up a couple of points, I think one of the things about constitutions is they create a set of rules that allow good governance and good debate at the council. And I think it's really important that we all follow those rules in future. And that's what the constitution sets out. So taking the two particular things that I think have raised the most queries, firstly on the pre-meeting on planning, I too remember when it was first introduced and by the Conservatives, and I was always quite wary about it. And I think you're right. I think it was because there were some silly things that have been said at planning meetings. I don't believe that's the case now. I think we have excellent training in place. We have excellent councillors that ask sensible questions. I think to be transparent, we need to make sure that decisions on planning applications are made in public. Too many times the discussions took place in the pre-meeting that were verging on talking about whether to support an application or not, rather than just purely technical changes. If councillors do have technical questions, then they can always contact the planning officer to get an answer at that point. So with our commitment to transparency, I'm sure we can all welcome that change. On the planning amendment on neighbouring ward issues, this is something that I brought to the Constitutional Working Group. It's a couple of things that happened to Pinckney's Green, which I felt weren't exactly quite right. I found it really frustrating that when an application, for instance, came in on about the Punt Hill triangle, those that know Maidenhead will know it well, which currently is in Boyne Hill ward, any application on it only affects Pinckney's Green residents. And yet the two then Tory councillors refused to call it in, despite the fact that it affected my ward, but didn't affect their ward at all. So this really is to resolve that anomaly in the system. And I'm sure we can welcome both of those and all of those changes that are being proposed. We had a really good cross-party constitutional working group where we went through all these points and agreed them. And I think my feeling from that meeting is you know, everybody agreed with them. So I look forward to everybody supporting all the amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beaumont, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, as I predicted, at the obviously Development Management Committee amendments are probably those ones which have gained most interest and discussion. I think that's an important thing that we've had the debate this evening. On the question about call-ins and neighbouring wards, I take on board what Councillor Hunt has said. However, I think the problem is it's very hard in the wording of a constitution to define what affects neighbouring residents actually means. I think we would need to come up with some kind of language which made it either clearer exactly what that meant, or potentially gave discretion to, say, the chair of the committee to determine what that means. I don't think trying to amend this on the fly right now is the best way to go. What I think would be the best thing to do, in my opinion, is what I'm suggesting we do now, is we go with the amendments as worded and the spirit of the amendments as put in the paper and discussed by Councillor Reeves. If it transpires in 6 months' time, we see that there's a load of random Cox Green applicants. I'm sure they would never do this, but if all of a sudden they got very interested in Knoll Hill for some inexplicable reason and were calling everything in, then we'll need a rethink, and we'll need to work together as the Constitution Working Group to really nail down these words. I don't want to withdraw it now. I think we need to move forward. I think it's the right step because of, on balance, the fact we need this ability to deal with things which directly affect neighbours. So I hope you can accept that, but we will certainly keep it under review because I do take on board the risks that you've described. In terms of the technical briefings, some important points have been raised. I think this again was a question of what do we see on balance would be the right way to go. And we have heard comments about from residents, objectors who feel that the debate seems like it was over before it even started in the chamber, in the actual committee debate, and that I'm sure that is what we want to avoid happening, is that what happens in public is just the tip of the iceberg, as it were. We need to see things. Sometimes it might not be pretty, but I think we owe it to the public to have those debates. Ultimately, yes, members on the panels will be available, will have the officers available for communications, in the week after while the report's been published, to ask technical questions by email or other communication means. I think, that certainly isn't going away, and we certainly encourage technical questions to understanding of, exactly how they've reached their recommendation are asked, continue to be asked in that way. But I think this is the right step. Again, as with everything, we should keep everything under review. The question was asked: were panel members consulted? I understand the chairs of both committees were consulted and agreed with this. I don't know to what level that things were disseminated down to panel members, but we did want to at least understand the perspectives of the chairs on that. When it comes to finally, obviously, I'm disappointed to hear that the link didn't work, Councillor Da Costa, because we did really want to have that discussion. Hopefully, we will actually be able to have that discussion properly. We've thought on high level terms about how it might work, but we do want to have the discussion with you in that meeting. So hopefully, fingers crossed. Next time, we can get you in there, and we will look at that point seriously. But again, I don't think it's right to try and make an amendment on the fly right now about that. So I think that pretty much covers everything. I guess, sorry. One last thing was the question about subs. I think that is an important point. And I will speak to planning officers about that. We're in a situation where subs have come in late, weren't expecting to need to understand the report inside out, and all of a sudden are being called upon to do that. I would speak to officers about that, because I think it's a valid point. But I think moving forward, this is the right direction. So I commend these amendments to the council.
Thank you. The recommendations are set out in the agenda papers and are appearing on screen. Are you ready for me to ask if this can be agreed unanimously? Thank you. That was clear. The next item is councillor questions, of which we have 3. Written answers to the questions have been shared and published to the council website. Councillor Larkham, do you have a supplementary question? You have 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Raisbury drain has been a problem for a very long time. It's over 200 years old, and today it is a 2-mile long, stagnant, dead pond. It's an ordinary watercourse. The people here are the lead local flood authority. It is your responsibility to look after an ordinary watercourse. You've had repeated reports that it's a problem. You had a petition not so long ago of 1,500 signatures asking for it to be cleaned out and sorted. This has just gone on, and I don't think that you can allow individuals and businesses to block an ordinary watercourse. You, the lead local flood authority, have the powers to deal with the problem. You have powers of enforcement, and you have powers to permit.
Councillor Larkham, you've had your minute, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Coe, would you like to reply? You have 2 minutes.
I think Ewan wasn't able to get to his actual question, so if you want to tell me afterwards, I will happily answer it there. If I go back to your original question, immediate is definitely not 200 years, but it might not be as fast as you would like it. We have taken this seriously since we were elected. I came to see you straight away, pretty much after being elected. And I think I've been on 2 or maybe 3 magical mystery tours around the Raisbury drain with you. So, you know, we are committed to delivering this. The team are working on it. I know we don't agree on whether or not we should proceed quicker with a different route or try and keep on the main route. But, you know, we have heard you, we are taking you seriously, and it's certainly my hope that this will all be done and dusted in the next couple of years.
Thank you. Councillor Gurch Singh, do you have a supplementary question? And you have a minute.
Through you, yeah, thank you very much for the response on the car park. That's really good news here. That's opening up. I just wanted to ask what lessons have been identified from the previous Conservative administration's failure to adequately maintain Broadway car park, and how will these inform future management strategies? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gertz, for your very good question. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's absolutely shocking that the previous Conservative administration failed to maintain the old car park 10 years ago, which meant that it literally started falling apart. You know, blocks of concrete were falling off it, landing on cars. I know about 10 years ago, probably more, that my colleague, Councillor Hill, was begging the Conservatives to spend the money to keep the car park maintained, to deal with the top surface to stop the water percolating through, but he was ignored. So in so many areas, the Conservatives failed to maintain basic infrastructure. One of our priorities is to put back those maintenance budgets into key infrastructure. It's unbelievable that when we came to power, there were no revenue budgets for dealing with things like street lights, for the trees being maintained, for all of these things were just not maintained. And the lesson, Councillor Singh, that we've learned from the previous administration is to make sure those maintenance budgets are in there so we can maintain the council's infrastructure properly and not let it just fall apart like they did. Thank you. Great question.
Councillor Singh, the next question was listed as being for Councillor Bamoj. However, Councillor Werner subsequently provided a written response instead, as this covered his cabinet portfolio of Maidenhead. Do you have a supplementary question? And again, just a minute.
Yeah. Moving on to that one as well. Obviously, this is a big issue in St Mary's as well. And I just wanted to ask how just some more information on that. How do you assess the performance of the joint venture so far? And what steps can be taken to enhance its effectiveness? So I just want a little bit of information about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Singh. Another great question. You are asking the good questions tonight. I think we all know that the Conservative version of the joint venture schemes pursued by the party opposite have been abject failures. They give all of the risk to the residents of the borough and giving all the power to the developer. Basically, the developer can spend any amount of money on carrying out the development. They take out their 25% profits. Then all the borough get, all the people of the borough get, is whatever's left over after the developer's spent it all, the residue amount. We saw this with the joint venture partnership for the Magnet Leisure Centre site. The £33 million we were promised at the start of the process, but in reality it came down pound by pound. And how much did we get for it? £11 million. Shocking. You can be assured that this administration will not be engaging in any more of these fake Tory joint misadventure schemes. Thank you.
Thank you for all your questions. The next agenda item is motions received, for which we have two. The first is set out on screen and has been submitted by Councillor Davies. Councillor Davies, would you like to introduce your motion?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Apologies, I've got a bit of a cold, so I'll try my hardest to make myself heard. I'm bringing this motion to Council tonight for two reasons. Firstly, because the Climate and Nature Bill has been gathering support from members of the public, and I've had a number of messages from residents asking why this borough isn't on the list of supporting councils. Obviously, we have had this similar motion brought to council before. And secondly, because it's been gathering support from MPs and peers. And it's now being brought forward in the Commons by environmentalist Dr. Ros Savage MP, who was successful in getting a private member's bill, and it's receiving its second reading on the 24th of January next year. The Climate and Nature Bill is important because it follows on from the former Maidenhead MP Theresa May's world-leading commitment to reaching net zero by 2050. A lead that continues to set the gold standard and has been followed by other countries. If made law, the Climate and Nature Bill would ensure that the UK creates a joined-up plan for both climate and the natural environment equally, and cuts emissions in line with limiting warming to 1.5 degrees, which, as we know, is crucial. It would also ensure that we would take responsibility for our overseas carbon footprint, for the emissions caused by goods manufactured overseas, for services consumed, the extraction of raw materials and waste production, and so give a much more realistic position of our progress. This is our last chance to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, though it's worth noting that the IPCC's remaining global carbon budget still only gives us an estimated 67% chance of achieving that target. I've been a councillor for 5.5 years now, and I've been speaking on climate and nature for that whole time. 5.5 years ago, I was talking about how the IPCC said that we had 12 years to prevent warming exceeding 1.5 degrees, and now it's 6 or 7 years if we're lucky. I've often spoken previously about this being about the legacy that we leave behind for our children and grandchildren. But in the light of recent climate extremes, it now seems as though it's more about maintaining a livable planet for us right here and now. I'm asking this council to join 370 other councils in supporting this bill, one more than actually when I submitted this motion last week. I'm also asking you to support me in writing to our borough's MPs to ask them to lend their support at the bill's second reading, which is next January. The Climate and Nature Bill is supported by over 1,000 scientists, by hundreds of organisations, including the Women's Institute and the National Trust. For anyone who's worried about the sort of company that they might be keeping, I find it very reassuring when I find that the WI are on the same page as me. It's supported by 216 MPs and peers from all major parties and independents, and from 370 councils, including 97 principal authorities, ranging from Newcastle City Council in the north to the Isle of Wight Council in the south, from Cornwall Council in the west to Norwich City in the east. And I hope that we can together add the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead to that list and continue the legacy of the UK's leadership during this global crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Is this seconded? Councillor Wisdom de Costa.
Thank you, Chair. I'm jumping in early because we may have to leave for medical reasons. So the Climate and Nature Bill, as Councillor Davis has said, is proposed by Lib Dem MP Dr. Ros Savage. And overall, it's pretty good, but it has a few flaws and a few missed opportunities. I think if I look at the overview, reduction in greenhouse gas emissions to net zero in line with Paris budgets, as Councillor Davis has said, is good. But reversing nature loss by 2030 is good, but its baseline of 2020 is not really credible because a lot of nature has already been lost by that point. So, and we've got to look at the impact of the climate change and the viability of existing UK species. We may want to restore our specific UK species, but quite frankly, as the climate continues to move forward, they're not going to survive. So we have to look at a new biodiversity biome map for the UK. Duties of the Secretary of State, great. Public involvement, good. Duties on the Committee of Climate Change and the always hard to say some of these things. Joint Nature Conservation Committee, that's great. Here is a missed opportunity though. When we look at approval by devolved legislatures, overall that's good, but you know, local authorities are uniquely placed to deliver rapid change, the rapid change needed, as every business and every one of the 70 million people in the UK lives in a local authority. Imagine mobilising local authorities to then mobilise the 70 million people in the UK and the £3 trillion of UK businesses to act on climate change. I put it bluntly, put it in RBWM's terms, we've got a capital spend of £100 million, but an influence of £15 billion. So if we could up our game, that would be fantastic. So also, I would suggest that they work with Professor Lord Krebs, who I've been doing some work with, who's got a private members bill in the House of Lords, because we also need to apply these to public bodies and also the industries like water companies, the power companies who are regulated by public bodies. And so the funding, I think that's a bit of a red herring because a lot of capital is available today, not revenue funding, but capital funding. But as Councillor Davis has said, in the context of accelerating climate change and the loss of species at rates more alarming than were predicted, even in the worst case scenarios 5 and 10 years ago. So yeah, I support the bill because we need those improvements now, because tomorrow will be too late. But I would say we need to add some ambition to our own environment and climate strategy, which ranks amongst the worst in the UK, according to Independent Assessor Climate Emergency UK. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hart.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly support point 1 of this motion. However, coming to point 2, to write to our borough councillors, stroke MP, same person, who is sitting, well, fortunately he's moved out of the chamber because he's got a conflict of interest, but sits in this chamber, and to thank him.
It's not very far.
Sorry, to thank him, he's waving at me, Mr. Mayor. And to encourage our Windsor MP to support the bill. So I object to that. Mr Mayor, are we going to have motions coming to this council to thank both our MPs every time they vote in Parliament? I can't do that. I'm not here to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I think many of us really care about a lot of the things involved in the sort of climate and nature bill and what is entailed in that. But I think we want to ensure that we leave this planet in a good state for our children and our children's children. And I think that is really important. But to get to the nub of this, we're writing a letter, as Councillor Hunt said, and I'll just pick up on what she's saying, to one of our MPs. If you want to write a letter to the MP for Windsor, I am sure he will be delighted to receive a letter from this council. I have to say I don't know what his views are on it, and he hasn't expressed views to me on it, but I'm sure he'd be delighted to receive a letter. But what I'm really concerned about is that actually within this chamber there are members who are paid for by the MP for Maidenhead, and I'm not sure that actually, because there are two of you who are paid by the MP, that you should also declare an interest in that. You've got a conflict of interest, I think, between what is council duty and what is MP duty. And I'm really not sure that that doesn't give you a conflict of interest. And we can't be sure really from that who is actually running the council.
Sorry.
It's not clear.
Yeah.
Is it
just pause, Councillor
Is it
Shaw,
the
if you have a
MP
point
who is just outside and is a member, or is it? So that's the point that I have. But what I want to say in terms of this bill and supporting it, I think we can all quite happily support the climate and nature bill. But I think to a degree, in reality, this is just grandstanding, because with a council in the financial state it's in, it actually doesn't make much difference what we're doing on this sort of side of things. I think it's a distraction. And I think really you would be far better advised to focus on the really important things that are addressable by the council, because ultimately what we do in this council in terms of climate is very, very minuscule in terms of how the planet survives. And I think the council should focus on what is actually important in this area rather than on these global issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Knowles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm in the odd situation of agreeing with both Councillor Sharp and Councillor Hunt. I'm just checking that I'm not turning blue under here somewhere. We discussed this as a group, and as they said, and I agree, there's a lot of important stuff going on at the moment. We're now creeping up to 10 o'clock, which is the 3-hour limit. Some of us are going to go to work at 6 in the morning. We've got an urgent agenda item tacked on the back of this meeting. Us doing this is not going to influence the vote in Parliament at all. Our MPs going, yeah, will do, but I would kind of expect them to turn up to such an important thing anyway, because it is an important thing to people in this borough. So I just think it's a waste of council time. And as I said, it's grandstanding. It's a political thing, and it's we've got more important things to go on to. Would it be terrible if we can't carry on the meeting past 10 o'clock and carry out the urgent business? But that will go on. But my hearing aid now is telling me that it's running out of power. So I'll be leaving shortly. And that's a shame, because that's what this is doing, just wasting time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor
Well, I suppose after a career in aviation, flying around destroying the planet, Councillor Knowles would have to say that. I hope they have a point back. But this is a really... This is a really important matter. Our planet and our lives are at risk. People will be dying in the summertime from excessive heat, and that will affect council services in this borough. So climate change is a matter that is happening now. It's a matter that affects people in Datchet, Horton and Raisby when they get flooded because rainfall has increased due to the greater amount of energy in the atmosphere. And it's a matter that will affect our elderly as we have hotter summers. So I do think this actually is a matter for the borough, and I do think we should add our voice to this bill.
Councillor Knowles, if you have a personal explanation, you have a minute.
Personally insulted by your insinuation. The flying I did around the world was in the UK Armed Forces. Okay? Not flying in an airline, it's a holiday, Councillor Kay. So I'd like you to retract that statement, as flippant as it was. I'm insulted.
Yes, we go live. I'm happy to retract that statement, Councillor Knowles. As you say, it was flippant and not thought out. I wonder if you'd retract your statement, which suggests that caring about the climate is time wasting.
Thank you.
Councillor Beaumont.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be very quick. I just wanted to point out that there is actually a point to trying to get both our borough MPs, support for this, which was kind of alluded to by Councillor Davies, but effectively as a private member's bill under the House of Parliament standing orders on a Friday, there's a very good chance that there'll be a closure motion, which would be required to be passed in order for it to progress past the second reading stage. So that requires 100 MPs to vote in the affirmative. If 100 MPs aren't on the estate because they're doing constituency work, which is often what happens on a Friday, then I have seen these things fail. So there is actually a substantive reason for trying to get support for our MPs. And I take on board what Councillor Knowles is saying about is this really the right time to be doing this. I wish this had been passed 2 years ago when Councillor Davies last raised this motion, and then we wouldn't be having this 30-minute debate this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Reeves.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I just felt I had to say something because I genuinely and wholeheartedly feel that it's an affront to democracy that a fellow councillor would think that this council is run by one person, and that I and other councillors do not take their responsibility seriously to truly represent their residents and this council as a whole. And I think that statement is also wrong and should not have been made. Thank you.
Councillor Walters.
I've left out the first word. It's pointless doing this, trying to do an MP's job. Let's do our own jobs. We've got enough to do.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, you seconded.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do. I'll be brief. For me, this is a very important issue, and I think it's important that we as a council support it and send a message to Parliament via the borough's MPs, and this is a very appropriate mechanism to do that. As has been explained, there is a possibility it will fail, so this is an important message to be sent. We do need the climate and nature factor to be legislated for so that it is built into decision-making more. I'll leave it there in the interest of time. Very happy to second the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davies, would you wish to sum up?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I thank those councillors who have spoken in support of the bill. I'm very sad to hear people making cheap party political points about what is an existential climate crisis. I think that's really not befitting this chamber. As Councillor Beaumont alluded to, as this is a private member's bill, there is a very good reason for seeking the support of our MPs specifically to be present and to vote at that debate, otherwise it will fall. And that was the motivation. I was independently very happy to see that Joshua Reynolds MP had supported the bill. I didn't know that he had until I saw his name on the list. And I think it would be great to give opportunity to both our MPs to show their support for this issue. I too wish that the council had supported this motion a couple of years ago when I brought it previously. Otherwise we wouldn't be here spending our time. And yeah, I think it's a real shame that people are making political points. I have been simultaneously hearing that that local councils are both more important than what's in this bill, and therefore we should focus, we should sort of focus on that, and also that we're not important enough. So I'm not quite sure what to make any difference. So I'm not quite sure what to make of that. I think this is a really important issue. Our residents think this is a really important issue. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been contacting me and asking us to express our support. I have, when they've got in touch, I've told them that the reason that we're not down as supporting is because the motion was voted down last time. And by whom? I'll be ashamed to have to do the same thing again.
Only 5 people request it. But the motion was, you've seen it. Oren, can you do a name vote, please?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So again, the motion is on the screen in front of you. I will call your names in alphabetical order. If you could please tell me if you're for, against, or abstaining on the motion. Councillor Baskerville.
For.
Councillor Bemange.
For.
Councillor Blundell.
For.
Councillor Bond.
For.
Councillor Bra.
For.
Councillor Buckley. Councillor Carpenter.
For.
Councillor Coe.
For.
Councillor Conneran.
Against.
Councillor Carol da Costa.
For.
Councillor Wisdom da Costa.
For.
Councillor Cross.
For.
Councillor Devon Davies.
For.
Councillor Karen Davies.
For.
Councillor Douglas.
For.
Councillor Gosling.
Against.
Councillor Grove.
For.
Councillor Hill.
For.
Councillor Howard.
For.
Councillor Hunt.
Against. Only on point 1, does it, the whole thing?
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Knowles.
Shame.
Councillor Larkham.
For.
Councillor Luxton.
Against.
Councillor Moriarty. Councillor Price.
Abstain.
Councillor Reeves.
For.
Councillor Sharp.
Against.
Councillor Shaw.
For.
Councillor Gertch Singh.
For.
Councillor Kashmir Singh.
Against.
Councillor Amy Teasey.
For.
Councillor Julian Teasey.
For.
Councillor Walters.
Against.
Councillor Werner.
For.
And Councillor Wilson.
For. The result is 27 for, 6 against, 3 abstentions. So that motion is carried. Screen and has been submitted by Councillor Julian Tizzy. Would you like to introduce your motion?
That's upon the conclusion of the current agenda item. So it's
Mr.
two
Mayor?
motions, but the same agenda item.
There will be some motions on those election.
Yeah.
Councillor Tizzy, would you like to introduce this, please?
This motion, I've got 2 points on it. The first point is it's a national Lib Dem party. So they've long been advocating proportional representation. This is a political.
Can you all be quiet for a moment, please? I think this is not sounds like a valid contribution to the debate, but it is not appropriate before it's been introduced or seconded. So if you'd like to hold your fire.
There's conflict of interest, and there's 3 people here in this chamber, councillors, who are from the National Lib Dem Party,
I think
who are actually an MP.
I'm quite happy for you to say this in the debate, but not before we've started.
And there is a conflict of interest there.
Councillor Hunt, would you give way so we can carry on, please? Tizzy, would you introduce, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So let me start by just explaining that there is no one electoral system called proportional representation. There are different systems. Some are proportional broadly, others like the one we have now, first past the post, are not. And there are some proportional systems like closed party lists, which are not preferential, as they don't allow you to choose individual candidates. But many electoral systems are both proportional and preferential, including, for example, I'll give you a couple of examples, AMS, which is used in Germany and also in Scotland and in Wales for Assembly and Senate elections, and STV, which is used in Ireland and also Northern Ireland for Assembly and local elections, and also in Scotland for local elections since 2007. So let me just set out very briefly, what's the problem statement? What would a better proportional and preferential system mean, and why are we raising this now? Now, I think the problem statement and what a better system would mean, I think, is in 3 things. There's democracy, the effect on voters and on the candidates we elect. Democracy, just a very, very simple and obvious example this year, the 2024 general election, Labour polled 1/3 of the vote, 2/3 of the seats, and all of the power. Now, there's nothing particularly democratic about that. The thing that is the most obvious effect of a non-proportional system like us. But the effect on voters, I think, is more important. Under a better system, all votes are counted. At present, under first past the post, if you live in a marginal seat, that's great. If you live in a safe seat, you and your votes are ignored. Mr. Mayor, can I just pause, please? I'm hearing a lot of talking around the chamber from all parts of the thing. Can we just maybe stop that for a second?
Yeah, if we could all settle down, please, and allow Councillor Tizzy to finish. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So another key reason for a better system is the fact that
We have safe seats and electoral deserts under our current system. And at present, there are areas of the country at both local and national level where some parties have either a stranglehold or a shutout. And this is not good for democracy or voters. And this is particularly for local councils. We've seen this. Lack of scrutiny can really hurt residents, can really hurt their pockets. Now, here's a view from Scotland. Scotland, as I said, has used a proportional STV system for 17 years now. The Conservative leader on the opposition and Fife Council, he said, well, before 2007, Fife was a one-party Labour fiefdom. I don't think anyone thinks about that anymore. The seats are spread out proportionally. I don't think anyone thinks of any bit as theirs. I think that's really good. Another thing is that there's no need for tactical voting. The current system in practice sees voters going against what they want to try to prevent another candidate they don't want. And it's an inexact science and it distorts results. A proportional preferential system would end the need for tactical voting and make it easier for voters to vote for who they actually want. I think that's important. Now, finally, the candidates we elect, who would benefit from a better electoral system? The answer is good MPs and good councillors. Absent or passenger candidates would not. In Scotland, good councillors of all parties have stayed despite electoral swings against their party, and at the expense of those perceived to have done less well for residents. I think that is good. And what would this mean locally in practice? Well, let's say the 2024 general election had been held under STV. We might have combined, say, Windsor, Maidenhead, Bracknell, Wokingham, Slough. One constituency, 5 MPs. But the voter gets to choose specific candidates, not just their party's one given candidate. And after the election, the voter has 5 likely more responsive MPs. But what about local elections? Well, to get proportionality, you need wards or constituencies with 3, 4 or 5 candidates. So some wards you could keep as they are, others you would just combine 2 together. You would get more split wards with competition between candidates to work best for their residents. I think that's good. It would favour the best. The experience of Northern Ireland and Scotland shows there is often collaboration across party lines. And very finally, why now? We live in a multi-party democracy. Our electoral system predates the rise of parties. It's totally unsuited.
Councillor Tizzy, you have had a good 5 minutes. So.
Okay, sorry. I'll just finish by just saying that Welsh councils are now using STV, or will be, which will just leave local elections in England not using the system. It's overdue for a better system.
Thank you. Is this seconded? Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak on this? Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is a totally irrelevant and meaningless motion because under the system that Councillor Tisi is going to apply, they got 12.52% or so of the vote in the election this year, and they got 72 MPs, whereas Reform had another 2.5% more votes than them. On that basis, they would have 80. The only time the Lib Dems moan about proportional representation is when they lose.
Yeah, I think Councillor Singh, Kashmir Singh's made a point there, and I bring up again, there is a conflict of interest on this one. It's a conflict of interest because it's a national Lib Dem party line that they've long been advocating for proportional representation. It's not thank you, agreeing. Yeah, it's not a council chamber, the RBWM. So anyway, so this motion is in actual fact to support the National Lib Dem Party. And then we have one Lib Dem MP sitting in the chamber who's a councillor, as a borough councillor, one Lib Dem Chief of Staff for the MP, was also leader of the council, and one Lib Dem political assistant for the MP in this council. They should have recused themselves from the council chamber. Yes, it is, because this should never have even come before us. Oh, it is, because they have a conflict of interest. Yeah, but they don't work for the MP, and they're not the MP. Pardon? I thought you were a political assistant. That's what you told me.
Can I just ask you all to pause? Thank you. I am advised it's not a conflict of interest under the Constitution, so I feel you've made your point, have said what you want to say, so if you could.
I've made my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to counter a point that, in fact, this last election, well, the Lib Dems have been consistently promoting proportional representation for decades. This election is actually, funnily enough, our most proportional result, where we won 48,000 votes per seat, where the average is 44,000. Now, I admit reform lost terribly from the system as it is now, and that is unfair. I might disagree with their party, but I think it is wrong that 4 million people only got split between 5 seats, 800,000 per seat. The answer is the Conservatives lost out even more than the Lib Dems this year for proportionality. Labour, on the other hand, were doing twice as well in votes per seat compared to the Lib Dems and 3 times as much compared to the Conservatives. The answer is this benefits us all because it is a proportional system that is fairer to voters. And while I can agree a council chamber for national politics maybe isn't the best thing, but we should represent our constituents who do support or have given support for this. This is a voice for that to join the national campaign, which other councils have done throughout the country, and we should put our votes and our voices behind this. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Connor on.
Hi there, Mr. Mayor. Am I on the microphone? It's my first time, right? Okay. On paper, I can see why people believe there are benefits to it, but ignoring the potential party reasons for voting one way or the other, and looking at the reality of the dangers opening because of proportional representation to bring the attention more to extremists, especially at a time when the world is facing nationalism and racism more than ever, I think it is dangerous.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It seems to me that, again, we're using council time very poorly. This is a national Liberal Democrat campaign, and we're using this council chamber to forward that campaign. It's not doing the residents of this area any good at all. So I think we should just dismiss this entirely. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to speak on this motion, but I will just say that I think at this time when democracy is under attack from many directions, it's more important than ever that we stand up for our principles and what we believe to be right. And therefore, I'll be supporting this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Coe, you seconded.
3rd of November 1534, Henry VIII put through the Act of Supremacy. He established the independence of the English state from the Church in Rome. 30th of January 1649, Parliament chopped Charles I's head off and established the supremacy of Parliament, and that was reaffirmed only 40 years later when William III landed at Brixham in 3 different places simultaneously, depending on whether you own the ice cream shop, the chip shop, or the rather untidy bit of quayside where the 3rd memorial is. We then had the three great Reform Acts that extended the franchise throughout the rotten boroughs and helped begin the foundations of our modern democracy. In 1911, we had the Parliament Act, which established the supremacy of the elected chamber over the hereditary feudal House of Lords. In 1918, we had the universal franchise extended to all adult men and men between the age of 18 and 21 who could show they'd served in the war. And in 1928, the Representation of the People Act brought in equal votes for women. The House of Lords Act in 1999 removed the hereditary peers with the exception of a small rump. Colleagues, the broad sweep of our history is a steady march from theocratic hereditary feudalism towards ever greater democracy. In this long journey, there are a few items which remain to be reformed, and one of those is our voting system. We have a modern franchise that includes all adults, but we have a medieval voting system that includes the mark of the illiterate as the means of which you vote. The time is nigh for a fair and proportional voting system that leads to representative bodies in our constitution properly representing the British people. And it's not just a Liberal Democrat policy. It's actually the policy of every single party in this country, with the exception of the Conservative Party. It's even the policy of the Labour Party, although they can't get their leader to actually implement it. A couple more points to address those that were raised during the debate. This isn't something the Lib Dems only raise when they lose. It's something the Liberal Democrats and the Liberal Party before them have been raising for 100 years. It was being floated at the time of the Parliament Act. Did I have another one? Maybe I didn't. Oh yes, so the final point is this. If we had a proportional system, the Conservatives in this chamber would now have 12 councillors and not the number they have.
Councillor Singh, you have already spoken. Well, only if it's a point of order.
What Councillor Cohen was saying, it's totally irrelevant unless we have a system where there's compulsory voting. It wouldn't be relevant.
I'm sorry, Councillor Singh, I'm advised that that is not a point of order. So, thank you. We'll move on to the proposal of the motion to. Sorry? Oh, I beg your pardon, Councillor Larkham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would remind this council that as a single ungrouped councillor, the political proportionality rules are used to exclude me from membership of any committee. Isn't that interesting? Thank you.
So, Councillor Werner.
Ewan's point, yes, I agree. It's a disgrace to democracy, and I think it should be changed. I believe it's government legislation or guidance. So I'll speak to an MP that's a friend of mine to see if he can raise it for me. Thank you.
Councillor Tizzy, to sum up.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I'd just like to pick up 2 points that have been raised in the debate. One is I'm going to mix the point that made by Councillor Reeves about reform. I thought was a very good point. I don't want them to get more representation, but I want them to be beaten at the ballot box because of their ideas, not because of some unfair quirk of the electoral system. And linking that to by the way, I'd like to welcome Councillor Conneran. Really good to hear in very first council meeting. I think you may raise a reasonable point about extremism, and I'd just like to link, however, that unfortunately, in reality, it's by disenfranchising people that you lead to extremism. You look at many countries around the world which have got I mean, look, the USA has got first past the post, and they unfortunately seem to have moved towards extremism. They talk about red states and blue states. In reality, there are Democrats in Montana, there are Republicans in New York. It just doesn't look that way. I would just also finally like to pick up the point made by Councillor Hunt. Yes, it is long-standing Lib Dem policy to support a proportional voting system, but there, as Councillor Coe put it, I think there are campaigners for reform across the political spectrum, including the Conservatives. I've spoken to a man called Keith Best for the Conservative Action for Electoral Reform, and I've spoken to him a number of times. And it's that this is just an anomaly. This should have happened almost 100 years ago. It's long overdue. And I'd just like to finish by saying that actually in local elections in this country, we've had proportional representation for some years now. Northern Ireland's had it for a long time. They need it. I mean, they need a good system and one that is not just fair, but is visibly fair for obvious reasons. And in Scotland, it was introduced. Even the Conservatives in Scotland, there are not all of them, but there are a lot of Conservatives now support electoral reform because it works, And in Wales, it's being introduced. And so this is relevant, especially to local democracy. And so I think it's overdue. We need to support it.
Thank you. The motion should just be coming up on our screen. Can this be agreed unanimously? No. Can we have a show of hands, please? In favour, yes. Sorry. Against? Yep. And abstentions? The motion is carried. I highlight to councillors that the time is now past 10 o'clock. There is just one item, an urgent item on the agenda. I'm advised that if we do not take this now, it will become an officer decision. Do you wish to continue the meeting for this final item? Yes, that's very clear. This item was deemed as an urgent item, which could not have been added in time for the publication of the agenda. I would rarely sanction these. However, I deem that for transparency, it is vitally important that Council considers this item tonight. Councillor Werner, would you please introduce?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. As you said, this item was added late to the agenda as an urgent item, which we don't like to do. However, sometimes it's unavoidable. And this is one of those times. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing it. We're in a position where an interim section 151 officer is required, which is a statutory position and is required by law. There's cross-party appointments committee meeting on Monday, the 25th of November, which will comprise of councillors from all parties who shall agree an appointment. However, it is full council who has the function of confirming a statutory appointment. Due to tight schedules and deadlines, it was not possible to hold the appointment committee in advance of this full council meeting, and therefore, in order to ensure the best and most efficient use of time, I'm asking that full council delegates authority to confirm the statutory appointment of the interim executive director of resources and section 151 officer to the appointment committee, which is multi-party. We will, of course, inform all councillors as soon as the appointment is made. I appreciate this is, of course, not a conventional process. However, for openness and transparency, which, as I made clear all through the meeting, is very important to me, we felt it important for this item to come before the full council for discussion, rather than it being treated as an officer decision. Alongside the cross-party and politically balanced appointment committee that will follow, this furthers our commitment to strengthening the council's governance, transparency and accountability as detailed within the council plan. I hope you can all feel you can support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is this seconded?
Mayor?
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Do you wish to speak or reserve?
Thank you.
So the seconder is reserving, and Councillor Sharp.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for bringing this to our attention, and thank you, Councillor Werner, for highlighting the situation that we've got. I'd just like to understand the situation with regard to our current monitoring officer and why the circumstances around why she felt she needed to leave so quickly and put us in the situation where we have an urgent item here rather than something which is slightly more planned, which is what we normally have, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you. You clearly meant section 151 officer. Councillor Beaumont.
Quickly, just to say, this is obviously a one-off proposal. This isn't part of the constitutional amendment, so this is to deal with the urgency of this particular situation. Everything is in order. It's not something that legally has to be confirmed by the full council. It can be confirmed by a committee of full council, which the appointment committee is. What I would ask, though, to that committee, and it's obviously at their discretion, of course, the actual deliberations and interviewing of the candidates needs to happen in part 2 for obvious reasons. It would be good if they are minded to publish the part that would ordinarily have been in the public domain in full council in part 1 of their minutes when they make that, so that, as well as obviously all members being informed, that informed also the public see that decision in the same way they would have seen it in a part 1 full council minute. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no more speakers, so Councillor Jones seconded.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support this paper as it's essential we fill the position as soon as possible, and as the appointment committee, as it's going to the appointment committee, it will have cross-party agreement. It's not my place to explain the reasons for the decision within this council, but I would just like to say a few words to put on record. Elizabeth Griffiths is leaving her Executive Director of Resources and S15 role within the Royal Borough. I cannot thank her enough for the hours she has put in and the difficult messages she has had to give regarding this financial situation of the council. We would not have such a good understanding of our financial situation and the historical accounting inaccuracies without her diligence, huge personal effort and her drive to enable the sustainability of this council. She will be a great loss to the council, but I'm sure all members will join me in wishing her every success in the future, although I don't think there is any doubt of her continuing success. Elizabeth and Julian, our Assistant Director of Finance, have recruited 3 new senior members to the finance team that will be joining us over the next 7 weeks. And to ensure continued cover of statutory requirements of the post, we are taking the steps to recruit an interim replacement. Personally, as lead member for finance, I would like to thank Elizabeth for her support over the past 14 months in what has been a very challenging role in an ever-changing financial landscape. Her openness and willingness to accept challenge has been a breath of fresh air and has made our working relationship a positive professional experience. So I thank her.
Councillor Werner.
Anything to answer, so yeah, shall we push on with the vote?
Thank you. Can this, oh, sorry, the recommendation is appearing on the screen. Yeah, now you can see it. Can this be agreed unanimously? That's very clear. Thank you. Thank you everyone for attending.